Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
Outside the door, hospital life was buzzing. Jacob sat at the resident's desk and filled out the histories of his patients. When he was a student, he had learned to disconnect from everything that interfered with thinking. It was a useful skill he used whenever work was at its fullest the previous night. The same thing had happened. An emergency situation had occurred. After midnight, a bleeding man was brought to the ward. The victim was brought in on a cart. Friends, drinking buddies, who, like the wounded man himself, were far from a little over. Interrupting each other, they told the doctor on duty. "How did the accident happen?" "Doc, we were just sitting around and nothing. And then Leo wanted to do an experiment. His wife keeps reproaching him for not being a man, like Leo's hands don't grow from there. So Leo decided to prove her wrong." From the story, accompanying the patient, Jacob realized that Leo dope in his head wanted to work with metal. But when he turned on the machine, which many years ago he had installed in the garage, something went wrong. The iron from which the accumulated in the houseman was going to make a flower broke out of his hands, and the sharp end entered the stomach. Although they were drinking themselves, they could hardly keep on their feet, and they realized that their friend could give God his soul, because one of the companions to the place of the banquet arrived by horse-drawn transport. They decided not to call an ambulance. "Guys, finally, we'll get to the hospital faster. Otherwise, while our medics arrive, Leo will be glued to his flippers." The owner of the truck was very close to the truth, because the surgeon had to urgently gather a team to save the inadequate. The medics spent almost 4 hours to eliminate the consequences of the favorite experiment. The course of the operation was also complicated by the fact that anesthesia did not take the patient for a long time, and everyone was afraid that he would die from a great loss. But the man crawled out of the clutches of death and barely came off the anesthesia. With astonishment, examined the neighbors on the ward. "Guys, where are we? I don't know this place, and my head is ringing like a bell. Let me get a hangover." It so happened that the patient uttered these first words after the operation during his morning rounds. However, Leo mistook Jacob for one of his friends. But the doctor calmly responded to the patient's request. "Everything, brother, today is canceled. And in general, you will have to stop drinking." Leo shrieked, holding his hand over his stitched-up stomach. "No way, and who are you to tell me what to do?" Jacob calmly began to explain to the patient that he was in the hospital. Only Leo began to understand something, as at that very moment a furious woman with a red mop of hair on her head burst into the room. Not paying attention to the doctors and patients, she rushed to the love and began to shake his infirm body. "Why did you trash the garage? How many times have I asked you not to drive drunkards? But you just can't help yourself." Rough physical impact caused the victim a lot of pain. And he screamed. "Raya's supposed to. I'm in pain, of course." Jacob didn't expect to see such an impressive scene of family strife play out before his eyes. In the first seconds, he was a little confused, and then resolutely stood between the indignant woman and the patient's bed. "Ladies and gentlemen, what are you doing here? We barely saved your husband. Leave the room." The doctor's actions, especially his decisive tone, had a sobering effect on Emily, although she, unlike her husband, had no inclination to drink hard liquor. The woman folded her arms on, breasts of metal. "I'm sorry I'm not myself. He's poisoned my whole life. I can't stand this outrage anymore." Leo intuitively felt that the situation had changed in his favor, and with a pained expression on his face began to justify himself to Ray's wife. "It's all demons. Remember, I told you that the evil force has been hunting for me for a long time. And yesterday, too, as soon as I drank red wine, they and a few other devils began to persuade me to turn on the machine. They told me that I could be the second, and that my work would soon be auctioned off for the price of a nice yacht." The woman mumbled through her tears. "You're a fool, Leo." Turning to Jacob, she began to explain. "My Leo has had an extraordinary talent since childhood. When he was young, he studied to be an artist and drew pictures." Leo interrupted his wife. "How many times can I tell you that they paint pictures? They paint the remarks of the husband." Emily did not react and continued, painted paintings for sale. And then out of the blue, I started singing. I did everything I could to stop him. I chased his friends away. I spiked his vodka with note grass, all to no avail. Leo chuckled. I'm like that. You can't test me with anything. His wife threw a threatening look in his direction and whispered, Doctor, I wish I'd had time to ask you to stitch that ampoule in his stomach before the operation. You know what I mean. Emily looked pleadingly straight into his eyes, and Jacob did not know how to answer her culturally. After a long pause, he said, I understand your anguish, but you are addressing the wrong address. At Emily's eyes sparkled in tears, and she reproachfully declared, Right people say that our medicine is not capable of anything. Vaughn knew that Over the River Lives puts everyone on their feet, does not refuse anyone. The nurse, who was also present in the ward during the rounds, caught a threatening note in the voice of the local resident, and became, you are right, to pull Emily out of the room. Go, please, do not interfere with the doctor examining the patients. Proudly shook the red-haired Punches. Emily left the room and Jacob was able to continue examining his patients. After the rounds, Nurse Tonika, as if, by the way, told the doctor you are a new person at us and have not yet had time to get acquainted with the peculiarities of local life. The fact is that specialists do not stay with us for long, so the population is forced to turn to healers, although most of such healers are charlatans. There is no other alternative. It is true that a young witch doctor who settled 3 years ago by the river really helps people. Tomichka wanted to add something else to her story, but at the last second she changed her mind. Jacob did not pay much attention to her words, although there was a case in his life, confirming the high effectiveness of unconventional methods of treatment. The man tried not to remember about that period, as it caused heartache. In Jacob's life, there were many difficult moments that he wanted to forget about. More than once he tried to start from scratch, but he did not always succeed. He had set out a month ago with such intentions too, although he hadn't planned a change of residence. But in the surgical department of the city hospital, where he had worked for almost 7 years, there was an unhealthy environment. And it happened after the superintendent appointed a reprimand Peter after the retirement of the old superintendent. The duties of the head for almost 6 months performed Jacob, and everyone was convinced that his candidacy is about to be approved at the top. But these optimistic predictions were not destined to come true. One morning, Jacob habitually opened the door of his office and froze from surprise. Behind his desk, a strange man stretched out languidly. Jacob did not start a scandal and delicately asked, Sorry, I do not know what to call you, but I wonder why you are in my office. The guest jumped up and in one leap crossed the distance separating them, without giving Jacob a second thought. He shyly embraced him. Jacob, my friend, don't you recognize me? Jacob took a closer look and hardly recognized the fat man. If you take off the smugness of Peter's face, who in his student years was a course younger than him, already then about this guy there were ambiguous rumors that like this is the son of an official from the highest echelon, and therefore in front of him automatically open all the doors, because Jacob did not have to previously cross paths with Peter, as he was called in the eyes of acquaintances. He did not pay attention to such gossip. Jacob didn't think fate would bring him back together with this upstart. 15 years after graduation, Peter's embrace lasted longer than the time foreseen for the summer. So Jacob had to use force to free himself from his guest. He responded to Peter's ebullient greeting, quite restrained. I'm sorry, I really didn't recognize you right away. You've changed a lot, you know. Peter immediately took offense. Every man has his faults. Although, in principle, my imposing build does not cause me much discomfort. Genetics is to blame. My appetite is fine. We're all Peter people, but I don't consider it a disadvantage. Jacob did not want to listen to the summarily speech of the visitors, because he had a busy working day ahead of him. Peter, I basically don't care what your weight is, and I'm not interested in other people's personal problems. It's surgery day, and every minute counts. But I realize it's no coincidence that you're in my office this morning. I'd like to hear an explanation for this intrusion. Peter was much shorter than Jacob, and he did not succeed in looking down on his rival. He thrust up his chin and spoke defiantly to Jacob. "This is not an invasion. As of today, I am acting superintendent. My nomination was approved last night." There was an awkward pause. Apparently, Peter expected his opponent to object or bemoan the loss of his position. But Jacob took the news very calmly. "Thank you. Now everything is clear." Jacob quickly gathered his papers and headed for the exit. "That's it. I've cleared the room. You can settle in." Peter barely shook his head, making it clear that from this day on he would decide whom to punish and whom to pardon. And indeed, with the appearance of a new head, the situation in the department has deteriorated sharply. Not only Peter had no practical experience, but he was giving out his recommendations left and right. Peter brought his own staff to the department, which the old workers did not want to put up with. To their discontent, the new manager replied, "I'm not keeping anyone here. Who doesn't like a free exit? There are no irreplaceable people." Jacob tried to reason with Peter. "Peter, I think you got off on the wrong foot. You can't throw away experienced personnel like that. After all, medicine is a field where the loss of one good fighter can affect the result of the entire battle." Peter's sensible remark has got his chin up again. "Jacob, I do not need your advice. My main task is to organize the work in the unit entrusted to me, and I will pursue that goal with all means at my disposal. Do you like it or not?" Jacob had to keep his opinions to himself. In a few months at the helm, Peter had dispersed the old staff. He encouraged snitching in every possible way and liked to organize at the meetings demonstrative floggings of the guilty. At the same time, Peter completely disregarded the rules of medical anthology. When Jacob reprimanded him, he in his characteristic manner replied, "I do not care about your offenses. In my department, everyone has to work with the utmost dedication, and people worked hard." Many could not stand such a schedule and left. Only Jacob continued to believe that things could change for the better. But as the days went by, months went by, and the situation only worsened. It became completely unbearable when Peter single-handedly, without coordination with common sense, began to promote the products of his own relative, who headed a large pharmaceutical company. Since Jacob was the lead surgeon, the superintendent summoned him to her office. Jacob intuitively felt that the upcoming conversation did not bode well for him. Peter, as always, with ostentatious arrogance said, "Sit down, Jacob. You know yourself. There is no truth in feet." Familial address cut on the nerves, but Jacob restrained himself. "It's all right, Peter. I'll stand. I don't have time to sit around. The patients are waiting." The superintendent's face was distorted by a squeamish grimace. "Oh ho ho. You'd think you were indispensable. I have to start by reprimanding you. Remember once and for all, I am your boss and you are my subordinates, so address me properly. I mean by name and patronymic." The insolence of this self-loving baboon was infuriating. But Jacob emphasized, politely replied, "I have exactly the same counter-proposal for you. I, like you, have an extremely negative attitude to any manifestation of panic." Peter's eyebrows went up. "Even so. Well, I'll take that into consideration. Jacob, now let's get down to business." The superintendent tossed a small box across the table. "This is a new breakthrough drug developed by a domestic manufacturer. Look to whom in our department it can be assigned." Jacob immediately realized where the head of the department was bending. He forcefully pushed back the package with the drug. "I will not prescribe an unapproved drug. I'm ordering you." Peter's face reddened with indignation and covered with sweaty, twin sweats, but Jacob was not impressed by his anger. The surgeon firmly repeated, "I will not prescribe to the sick, untested remedies. And if you insist, Peter, I will appeal to the federal ministry. You don't think you alone have an omnipotent hand." After this altercation, the relationship between the chief and the lead surgeon soared completely. Peter, with the help of his snitches, watched the surgeon's every move. And when Jacob made an inexcusable mistake, refusing one patient in hospitalization, the head of the case blown up. Jacob was summoned to the regional department. They read out the entire form. He received a reprimand with a note and was deprived of a bonus for 6 months. Endless battles with the superintendent we swamped Jacob. He felt on the verge of a breakdown and decided to have a man-to-man talk with Peter. Peter listened to him, and then with the same ostentatious superiority, said to Jacob, "Maybe I'll forgive you, if you ask me nicely." "Good. How's that?" Jacob expected the chief to start pushing that dubious drug on him again. But Peter came up with a more elegant punishment. When you need something badly, it's not a bad thing to get down on your knees. Jacob laughed outright. "Peter, you should definitely consult a psychiatrist. You're overcome with unhealthy fantasies." That same day, he wrote a letter of resignation. One of the best surgeons in the city had been out of work for a month. He was about to take a job in the ER when he got the call from Andrew. "Jacob, I heard a rumor that you're out of work." "Yeah, I took a short break, but I got some ideas. I'm looking to change the field a little bit." Andrew yelled into the phone, "Don't even think about it. You're a surgeon from God. You dropped in on me. I want to offer you a place." Andrew Jacob was in the same class with Andrew. They were on a humanitarian mission together in Africa. Then their paths diverged. Andrew later graduated from the military department and was in hot spots. Once he was very unlucky and got a serious wound, after which he could not operate. When he was offered a position in the regional Ministry of Health, he accepted. As a man devoted to his favorite profession, Andrew did everything to save human life, in the global sense of the expression, having learned about the difficulties of Jacob, with whom they had been traveling around the world for several years. The high official immediately engaged in the employment of a friend. Jacob did not wait for a second invitation, and on the same day went to visit whom he greeted him warmly and immediately said, "There is a vacancy for a surgeon. Of course, you can refuse such an unenviable position, but this district hospital in the next 2 years will be renovated. I don't have to tell you what prospects await you." Jacob weighed the pros and cons and agreed to move to the backwoods. "Thank you, Andrew. I don't really have much of a choice, so I'll take you up on your offer." Andrew gave the surgeon a friendly pat on the shoulder. "A change of scenery will do you good. Perhaps in this you will meet your destiny." This wish embarrassed the man, who had long ago given up the search for his happiness. All his attempts to merge the family nest ended in painful losses, and he had long ago got rid of illusions. He put all his energies into his work. Sergiv was not distinguished by its scale. This small town is nestled on a hill and terrain. From the cave they are along and across, large and small rivulets. Many natural water bodies did not have names for easy orientation. The local population used such terms as the river behind the dark forest, or the river near the poultry farm. Molly learned the peculiarities of local toponymy as a child, when she and her mother came to visit Wendy. But in 20 years, things have changed. Even in such a wooded corner as Native Village, only an unnamed rivulet, flowing almost right next to the house. The old Snakar still rolled merrily in its waters into the unknown distance. In the spring, it fell apart, flooding the nearby meadows, but by the end of May it returned to its usual course again. And then it could be waded across on any property. Wendy's modest home had long ago been on a topsy-turvy path. For dozens of years, this woman had been doing her best to help the people of the district center and the small villages scattered on both sides of the creek. When Znaharina finished her earthly journey, the baton was taken over by her young relative Molly, appeared in the cabin across the creek in the middle of winter. In midsummer, she gave birth to a baby boy. The villagers told various legends about the girl and the unknown father of her child. Although more than 3 years have passed since that time, the folk myth-making has not died down. Of course, to the very heroine of these stories reached the scandalous rumors. But Molly did not attach any importance to them. When especially curious comrades pestered the girl with questions, she smilingly answered all sorts of in their own sophisticated. Such an answer caused misunderstanding and gossip, and try to find out whether you do not care what people say about the forest with the same childish smile answered, "Let them talk." That's what language is given to man to speak. A smart person would think before believing such stories. They are clever. Everything is forgivable for such people. Such statements of the young Snakar caused bewilderment. A girl of 25, no more than 25, and she talks as if she had a whole life behind her. However, those who expressed such an opinion was not far from the truth, because in her short life, this girl had time to learn and the bitterness of the loss of a loved one and betrayal of a friend. But she did not break and continue to believe in people. A new day was just dawning brightly in the east, and Molly was already on her feet. She had set out a plan of work from the evening and now began to fulfill the first item of breakfast. If someone had told her 5 years ago that she would be counting minutes and seconds, Molly would not have believed such nonsense. The boy mumbled something in his sleep, and the young woman rushed to her son's crib. But the alarm was false, and she tiptoed into the miniature kitchen and began cooking. Although Molly had little culinary experience, she was pressured by her mother. "Daughter, remember once and for all, you can only cook food when you're in a good mood. If the hostess is angry or dissatisfied, it will definitely affect the taste of the food." Mom left this world more than 5 years ago, but her invisible presence Molly felt almost constantly. In the most difficult moments of life, she mentally turned to the only native person, and the image of her mother immediately appeared in front of her eyes. Today, also a deceased parent. Early in the morning, she visited her daughter. She was smiling as always, but the words spoken to her made the girl shudder. "Molly, don't trust those who make sweet promises. Be careful and take care of your son." The young woman pondered over this message from another world. While she was preparing breakfast for herself and her little son, she knew very well that the meaning of these words would be revealed later. It had happened more than once, but the girl never ceased to be amazed at the strange connection with the deceased, the mother, and the surprising truthfulness of her predictions. When it happened for the first time, she thought that on the background of wild stress, she was slowly going crazy to prevent unwanted consequences. Molly recounted verbatim to Wendy the conversations with the calm mother. But the old woman only grinned. "Don't be afraid. It's fate sending you signs through the image of her mother. Such messages should not be ignored." Molly didn't believe the old woman, who was also a very distant relative. "Grandma Wendy, it's all bullshit. I don't believe in all sorts of otherworldly forces and evil doom." Wendy looked at her so that it was her looks. Everything inside went cold. "You don't believe and you laugh in vain. It won't be long before you realize what you've been given this gift for, will you?" Molly laughed again. "Grandmother, do you consider the voices that trouble me a gift?" "Of course I do. After all, everything you hear comes true later. Almost everything. But it seems like pure coincidence to me. Remember, idiot, nothing in this world happens by chance. Everything has a meaning, but not everyone understands it." Grandma Wendy often said strange things. Many people were afraid of her, but they still went to her for help. Molly looked at the picture of Grandma Faith in the antique frame and sighed, and "Mommy left me. And you, Grandma, left without forgiving 6 too. But thank you for not forgetting, visiting nonetheless. I get only good signs from you, and I try to do good myself." Molly did not have time to finish this pleasant thought, because someone insistently knocked on the window, who came so early. The woman rushed to the door, but did not immediately manage with the shield. The knock was repeated to the landlady. She had to ask the early visitor, "Don't bang so loudly. You'll wake up the baby." The request was heard and the knocking stopped. The young snackar opened the door with difficulty and squeezed into the narrow space. Lucy Guest at once expressed her displeasure. "What are you so long entrenched or hiding? Who in the house from the eyes of strangers?" The visitor looked around, but found nothing suspicious. "I was going to visit you yesterday, but I didn't have time. So many things to do around the house, I have no time for anything. And then there's this damn splinter." The woman nodded at her bandaged palm. "I got it 3 days ago. I thought it was nothing, but it was just a fire burning and twitching inside." Molly asked for a guest. "Aunt Lucy, why don't you sit in the chair and I'll look at your arm?" Lucy lamented about her miserable life. The healer complied with the request, but as soon as the hand sign touched her arm, she cried out, "You be careful, or I might pass out from the pain." "I've had that happen to me before when I pulled a tooth. It took half an hour to pump me out." "Aunt Lucy, but I can't treat you if I can't see the wound." "I'm telling you it's a splinter. There's no wound. I'll unwrap the bandage myself. Kukushkin began to remove the bandage, and Molly did not hold back her exclamation when she saw the woman's palms swollen across the wall into her neck. Aunt Lucy here, already herbs and lotions, cannot help. You need to run to a surgeon immediately, or you may lose a limb. The visitor waved her inflamed palm. What kind of healer are you if you send me to a doctor? I don't take on anything I'm not sure of. In this case, I doubt conservative methods will help you. Lucy swung his sore arm again. Look, don't act so smart. You've got all these words and you expect me to believe you. You don't know anything, you're only good at twirling your tail. You can't do anything but twirl your tail around and take advantage of other people's fiancés. Molly knew about the character of this woman, but did not think that Aunt Lucy would allow herself such a prank in someone else's house. Trying to keep calm, she asked the guest, "Why did you come to me, for help or to humiliate? And please don't yell. I have a small child." But these requests could not stop Lucy. She began to denounce the witch doctor for all her sins. "Who are you to make a remark to me? In the old days, people like you were burned at the stake, and rightly so. Don't mess with the people, you charlatan." And the stranger's indignant cries of the visitors were interrupted by a child's crying. Little Zach jumped out in his pajamas and barefoot. He fought with fear and cried, "Mommy, I'm afraid this Aunt Witch will chase her away instead of apologizing and leaving the stranger's house." Lucy attacked the baby. "It wasn't me. Apparently, boy, it's your mama. Let her tell you who she took you from. You can tell who your daddy is without her confession. Sam Jones, the naked eye can detect further mayhem in your home." Molly couldn't stand it. She went at the visitors with determination, although she was much larger than her in stature. "Aunt Lucy, leave nicely, or I'll have to use force." Lucy backed down, but she didn't give up. "We'll see who's who. I'll tell the police. Let him find out what kind of bird you are and what right you have to occupy this house. And I'll inform your superiors. Who are you really? And they'll broom you out of the poultry farm. You'll be sorry you ever messed with me." Before slamming the door, Molly, as calmly as possible, said, "Aunt Lucy, you go to the hospital right now. I hear there's a new surgeon there. They say he's very experienced." Instead of thanking her for the sound advice, Lucy launched a stone to slam all the doors shut. Then she muttered curses and headed out. Zach sobbed some more. Molly did her best to calm the baby. She pressed her son to her breast and whispered, "Don't be afraid. Sonny, we are with you. I won't give you to anyone." The mother's caress had a calming effect, and Zach became quiet. Molly continued to rock the baby in her arms, remembering how her mother always found the right words when children's troubles happened to her. Tears did not flow from her eyes. And the young woman silently whispered, "Mommy, how bad it is that you are not with me. We are all alone in this world." In her short life, Molly had experienced loneliness in all its forms. Her first conscious thoughts were related to this unpleasant feeling. But at an early age, she didn't understand why her daddy didn't want to play with her. When her mother was at work, at any request of the girl, the head of the Edwards family rudely replied, "I have no time to entertain you. You have plenty of toys. Go to your room." If Molly did not obey her father's orders, he would push her out the door. When William was particularly angry, he could miscalculate his strength, and his rough touches left bruises on the girl's arms. One day, the mother was worried sick when she saw purple spots on her daughter's hands. "Molly, where did you get that?" The daughter immediately blurted out, "Daddy did it to me." I didn't listen to him, and he got angry when he heard the girl's answer. William was furious. "Molly, who taught you to lie?" Such a little girl is already lying, noticing the wary look of his wife. The man began to explain to her excitedly. "Betty, who do you believe me, or this dog? You know very well that little children are prone to lying. Molly is an overly active little girl and is always bruising herself during her playtime." Betty replied, not right away. "See, I might have believed your version if it weren't for one thing: children are more likely to have bruises on their feet. And there are blue spots on the shoulders and arms. And it's hematoma-like in nature. It's not hard to figure out how they got there." Molly remembers well how, at these words of her mother, the father again threw her an angry look. But at the same time, he faintly asked her daughter, Tell Mommy it's not true. Have I ever hurt you?" The man's question went unanswered because Molly ran off to her room. Already at the age of 5, she knew very well how an honest answer could turn out for her. She drew patterns on the horse glass with her finger until late at night and dreamed of a very different life. Betty, after that egregious incident, also drew the appropriate conclusions. She placed her daughter with friends or acquaintances for the time she was on duty. William did not object to this change, and when Molly returned home, he wryly remarked, "Ours is back. And how is it at other people's aunts' houses?" "Better than at home with Daddy, I guess." Although the girl didn't like the nomadic lifestyle, she answered her father's questions with an affirmative nod of her head. From then on, she stopped seeing William as Molly's father and protector, avoided talking to him at all costs, and tried not to be alone with a man from whom undisguised hatred emanated. Despite the differences between the spouses, the Edwards family was considered exemplary because in those years, above all valued above all material well-being. Neighbors, acquaintances openly envied the couple. Grandmothers in the evenings on the bench at the entrance discussed. Such good, positive people. Both doctors get a decent salary. They have a car. The apartment is also richly furnished. What else do you need for a happy life? This is a question Betty has not found an answer to for many years. Indeed, professionally, she and her husband were doing quite well. She was the head of the environmental department at the city hospital, while her husband held a senior position in a private clinic. His father, who had been a prominent financial official under the socialist system, had provided him with a warm place. The Edwards family was not in need either, although there was no extra money. But for all the apparent prosperity was not the main component of love. Betty and William studied at the same institute, but in different departments. What happens in a student environment? The young people first developed a friendly relationship. Betty was courted by William's friend, who then had an accident. In the most difficult moments, William gave the girl a friendly shoulder. "Betty, you can always count on me. You've lost a loved one, and I've lost my best friend. It seems to me that together you and I will be able to bear this loss more easily." The girl gratefully accepted the guy's words. But their relationship very soon ceased to be friendly. William told the girl Betty more and more insistently every day that you should let go of the past. You can't get your old love back, and you shouldn't dwell on it. You're a young, beautiful woman, and I think it's stupid to condemn yourself to loneliness. Believe me, 5 years will pass, and you will regret that you missed the opportunity to be happy. William made speeches like that almost every day, and Betty gave in. But there was one more thing that made her give in to the guy's entreaties. Soon after the tragic death of her fiancé, she realized that she was expecting a child. But William Edwards reacted positively to this fact. He assured the girl Vetui, "I consider it my duty to take care of my best friend's child. So the sooner you and I formalize the relationship, the better it will be for all of us." This confession completely reassured the girl, and she agreed to become William's wife. But apparently, the groom did not hold back and told his father that his young wife was expecting a child from another man. Edwards Sr. was furious and, without choosing words, began to reproach his son. Only a complete idiot could come up with such an idea. Have you seen any conscientious movies? Voluntarily take responsibility for someone else's child? Well, I'll tell you straight, son, once you've got it on your shoulders, you carry that burden until you get tired of it. But in my house, William has decided to correct his father. Betty's expecting a girl. I don't care, a girl or a boy. I do not wish to see her child in my home and will never acknowledge it. Of course, Molly was not privy to the backstory of its birth, but she did not have the opportunity to learn of her grandparents' love, as her father's parents ignored the fact of its very existence. William himself subsequently repudiated the commitment he had, in a burst of the kindest affection, willingly made before she was born. The truth that she was not his own daughter, Molly learned only after the death of her mother. Betty kept this family secret until her last breath. The sudden departure of her mother was a terrible blow to Molly. After all, Betty had never complained about her health. She ran in the mornings, and on weekends, she did not visit the swimming pool. This resilient woman seemed to have endless energy. Even William often joked about it. Betty, I'm sorry, but I often think there's a perpetual motion machine inside you. I'm completely exhausted by lunchtime, and there's no mistaking you. On such remarks, Molly's mother answered simply, William, unlike you, I cannot relax, so I try to always be in tone. The smile disappeared from the woman's face as she added thoughtfully, it's true that I've been having a lot of headaches lately. The girls took my blood pressure, and it's higher than normal. Molly did not hold back, despite William's presence. Mom, is it time for you to take a break? You should go to a resort near the sea and have a good rest. The head of the family, with unconcealed irony, exclaimed, dreams in you are weakness. Molly, do you believe in what you're suggesting? Who will let your mom go to this resort? I mean, she's indispensable. She's used to pulling the whole department. Daughter and mother exchanged understanding glances and did not enter into an argument. They knew that such verbal altercations most often end in a heated scandal with insults. Molly locked herself in her room, immersed in reading notes. She too decided to devote herself to medicine, as her mother, and studied at the 3rd year of medical university. That momentous conversation in the kitchen was soon forgotten. Only later, when Mom was gone and the memory involuntarily surfaced moments that Molly had not given importance to before. Subsequently, the girl repeatedly chastised herself for inattention. The alarm beacon didn't work, and when her mother had to call an ambulance to the house, the woman's well-being deteriorated suddenly. She turned pale and grabbed the back of a chair. Daughter, I don't feel so good. Dial 03. The emergency team arrived just 5 minutes later. The doctor scolded Veda for not caring about her health, and then gave her an injection. After that, the mother felt much better. The head of the household was not at home at the time. Betty asked her daughter not to say anything to him. Daughter, your mother was just a little tired. So my blood pressure's skyrocketing. Tomorrow morning, I'll call the chief and take a couple of days off. But in the morning, the woman forgot her intention and flew to work. Molly tried to stop her. Mommy, you were really sick yesterday and you promised to stay home. Betty looked at her watch and answered on the run, daughter, let's talk about it later. I'm feeling pretty well today. Wednesday is my surgery day, so I can't just take a vacation. You're a medical student, so you should know that your duty to your patients is more important than a minor ailment. Molly was at a lecture when the cell phone in her jacket pocket. Seeing an unfamiliar number, she felt very anxious and asked to get off. An unfamiliar female voice and dryly informed Molly, Betty, I've gotten sick after surgery. She's in intensive care now. She's having a stroke. But don't worry. Our doctors will do everything they can. Without hearing the optimistic message, Molly, the head nurse of the environmental unit, ran to the hospital. She spent 3 days in front of the ICU doors, believing in the medic's prognosis. But despite the efforts of the best specialists, Betty passed away without regaining consciousness. She was only 43 years old. Everything that followed was a blur. On the day of her mother's funeral, it was raining heavily, so the ceremony was held in a crumpled manner without any heartwarming speeches. After the cemetery, everyone went to the restaurant, where William decided to organize a wake. Molly refused to take part in this obligatory meal, which caused the anger of her father, and then she decided to stand out. Think what people will say if you don't show up at the wake. The girl replied in a colorless voice, I can't get my mom back anyway. I can't eat and drink and watch others fill their wombs. You see, I can't. William swore profanely, then said he didn't want to tell you on a day like this, but you asked for it. I'm sick of your antics, and I'm not going to put up with them from now on. Mother's gone. You can't count on me. The meaning of these parental words came to the girl later, when she discovered that the refrigerator was completely empty. When her father came home, she told him that they had nothing left but pasta. William looked at her as if he was seeing her for the first time. Did you forget? I warned you that it's every man for himself now. How old are you? Is that right? Soon to be 20. Mature enough to earn your own food. Molly was stunned by her father's words. Dad, I have to get my diploma. Go ahead. I don't forbid you, but I don't intend to support you. The man hesitated for a few seconds, and then, looking directly at the girl, in the eyes said, Mother did not tell you. I didn't want to spoil family relations. The thing is, I'm not your father in the sense of biological connection. Your mom got pregnant by another man who left her. I married her out of pity. It was the second blow that completely broke the young girl. All night she cried at the window, no longer hoping for help. The next morning, Molly did not go to the university because she had to look for a livelihood. She spent several days looking for a suitable job, but found nothing. All the following days were like a terrible dream. Molly woke up in the morning and went to the kitchen to prepare some food from the leftovers, but she quickly ran out of pasta and cereals. There was nothing to satisfy her hunger. This black day just coincided with the day after the funeral of her mother, because she had no one to consult with. The girl went to the cemetery, where she spent the whole day until the evening. She went home only after an old woman who passed by shook her head in sadness. Grandfather by evening and go home. The deceased don't like to be disturbed at a time like this. Molly thanked the woman and left the cemetery. But another shock awaited her at home. As soon as she opened the apartment door, she saw a strange woman in the hallway wearing her mom's slippers on her feet. Molly's eyes went black, and she screamed, "Get out of here. Don't you dare touch my mom's things." The woman was frightened. From the kitchen came William's voice. "Molly, calm down. I warned you the other day that things would be different in this apartment now. In fact, although you are registered here, you have no rights to this apartment because you are not a blood relative." The man appeared in the hallway with a frying pan in his hands. "But I'm not chasing you away yet. Though things may change if you show your true self." Molly immediately arose. Edwards continued, "And now we can move on to introductions. This is Vanessa, my colleague. Please love and welcome. Dinner is almost ready. I hope you haven't forgotten that today is the 9th day. I haven't forgotten. I was at the cemetery." Molly wanted to refuse dinner, but hunger took over and she went to the kitchen. When Edwards graciously invited her to the table, she did not listen to what he was talking about with his colleague, because her thoughts were occupied with solving one question: how to go on living. After the final dinner, William went to see Vanessa off. Molly went to her room, the worries of the last days and her nervous system, and the girl felt incredibly tired. She did not notice how she fell into a heavy, restless sleep. It was then that she had her first dream. Molly's mother did not remember what the late mother said, but in the morning she felt relieved. It was as if she had recovered from a long illness. Another event happened that day that would later change her life. She decided to go out in the morning to look for a job. She was immediately lucky. At the bus stop, she noticed an advertisement that attracted her. A day caregiver for a paralyzed woman was needed. Molly tore off a piece of paper with a phone and immediately dialed the number listed there. She was answered by a young man. "Yes, we urgently need a caregiver, preferably with a medical degree. If you meet these 2 requirements, come on over." The man dictated her address and she was about to set off, but accidentally pushed the woman to wait at the bus stop for her bus. Molly hastily apologized, and at that moment she heard someone's voice. "This woman is about to back up and get hit by the bus. Help her." Before Molly knew it, the woman she had accidentally hit recently was rushing forward. But she didn't realize her strength. Molly managed to pick her up as she fell. The old lady was in shock. "I could have been hit by a car. Thank you, Molly. You saved me. Let me thank you." The woman went through her purse, but Molly absolutely refused to take her money. Good deeds don't require payment. "It's not nice that I helped you out of trouble." In high spirits, she went to the address, where she was met by the owner of a pleasant baritone. He helped Molly to take off her cloak and only then held out his hand to Martin. Molly gave her name. The landlord led her deep into the apartment. "The 3 of us live in this big apartment. I have a purely female company, so it is me who has to solve all the problems. My grandmother Lola needs care. My mother and I not so long ago took her from the village because there she was alone. But apparently, the change of residence did not go in favor of my grandmother. She decided to put us in order, but forgot about her age. As a result of a fall from a stepladder, she suffered a concussion. I don't know much about medicine, but after that injury, Grandma's legs gave out. Her hands are fine, and her speech is almost completely recovered. But she can't walk. Molly assured the young man I can handle it, although I do not have a diploma yet, but with the duties of a caregiver will not be a problem. I'm in my 3rd year of college, but at the moment I have a difficult life situation, so I had to leave the university for the time being. Martin listened attentively to the girl and suggested that Molly explain the reasons for your difficult situation. You don't have to, especially if you find it difficult to talk about it. Martin smiled and pointed to the door in front of which they had stopped. In this room is your future patient. Come in. Moore is looking forward to seeing his assistant. She's very sociable. Lola greeted Molly with a charming smile. What a cute little girl. I promise I won't be cranky and will do everything you tell me to do. My first day as a caregiver flew by. Martin's grandmother was not at all shy of the new person. She was happy to share her memories with Molly and generally acted as if she had known her for a long time. When Molly returned home, she remembered the day's incident at the bus stop and whispered in horror, "How did I not realize it was Mom's voice? Am I really going crazy?" Fear crept into Molly's heart, and she even thought about going to a specialist about the strange voices. But then she changed her mind. Basically, I don't mind the voices. And if I go to a psychiatrist, I may be placed in a closed institution. It's probably just a temporary disorder, and it appeared against the background of severe stress. The most important thing now is to be able to earn a living. With this optimistic thought, the girl fell asleep after the first working day. Soon Molly regained her former confidence and was happy to wake up in the morning. She hurried to her patient, and they spent the whole day talking. Martin met Molly in the morning and walked her to the bus stop in the evening. He didn't like to talk about himself. Only once he confessed to Grandma that I had wonderful children. But with my mother, we don't have a good relationship. She's always trying to impose things on me that contradict my principles. You know, when I was a child, I dreamed of becoming an adult as soon as possible, to get rid of my mother and their moralizing with Martin. Molly felt free and at ease. She noticed that the young man was also showing interest. Many times the girl caught his long gaze, and it is a mutual sympathy. It did not escape the keen eye. "Lola, you are such a handsome couple. I look at you and can't help but admire you. It's been a month." Molly's ward began to sit up with her help and then stood on her feet. The old woman considered her healing a miracle. "You got me back on my feet. I didn't believe I could walk anymore, but when you appeared, I felt strong. Just the touch of your hand helps." Molly, it was nice to hear the old lady say that, but she didn't pay much attention to it. Meanwhile, her relationship with Martin became more romantic. The young man began to give her flowers. Once he invited her to the movies. After the session, they walked along the waterfront, and Martin uncertainly suggested, "Molly, you could live with us? It would be more convenient for everyone." The girl doubted the correctness of such a decision. "How would your mom feel about it? Are you sure that she will like the constant presence of a stranger in the apartment?" "Honestly, I don't know. She's a very unpredictable person, and she's a little unpredictable." "Then don't make her angry. By the way, she's due back from a business trip any day now. It was her idea to hire a nurse for Grandma. I was totally against it at first, and now? Now I'm glad I listened to Mother. But that's probably the only positive example." Lissa showed up unannounced. Molly was in the bathroom when she heard strange footsteps in the hallway. She shouted loudly to Martin, "We're having a water treatment. Don't come in yet." But the door swung open. "Who's that? Who's making such a racket in here?" Lola answered. "Oh, the traveler's here, and she's not happy as usual. Or a black cat crossed your path on the way home." "Mom, are you always joking?" Lisa went into the room and kissed her mother. Lola was touched by his daughter's attention. "Martin and I have been waiting for you. He had to sit with me for almost 2 weeks, and then he came to us through an ad. This beautiful girl is here. Her name is Molly. She forgot we were going to hire a caregiver," the old lady mumbled. Now I see who has a short memory. Although at first, Lisa had treated the young caregiver with ostentatious coolness. Over time, their relationship warmed. Martin's mother was particularly impressed by the fact that one day during dinner, Molly confidently told Lisa, "You should not put on pickles because you have diseased kidneys." If I'm not mistaken, The woman dropped the cutlery from her hands and stared at the girl. "How do you know about my kidneys?" Molly made an uncertain gesture with her hand. But she did not answer the question. She realized how her story would be received by the voice. But the hostess was struck by the girl's abilities. She wanted further proof. For this purpose, Lisa invited her friends. The woman even thought of a suitable reason to drink tea in pleasant company. Molly felt uncomfortable surrounded by status ladies and wanted to leave the room of the hostess. But Lisa asked her to. "Molly is scanning my girls. Tell me, what are their hidden ailments?" The girl was dumbfounded. "And I'll tell you later, well." She hurried to her ward's room and took a long time to come to her senses. The old woman noticed that the girl was distraught. "Molly, what's wrong? Or were you offended by a close call?" "No, everything is fine." Soon the hostess escorted the guests and looked into Lola's room. "Molly, I need to talk to you in confidence." The girl realized that Lisa would ask her for information about the hidden ailments of her friends. But there was nowhere to go. So she told her that one woman had no health problems, just a little nervous. Second, in Molly's opinion, you should get a checkup right away. There's something wrong with her heart. There may be a congenital defect that hasn't been detected yet. It's been a few days. I meet Molly in the hallway in the morning, and the landlady mumbles, "Yes, your prognosis has been confirmed. There is indeed a hidden defect. That's just amazing. Tell me, how do you manage to see what doctors can't see?" The girl didn't know what to answer and only shrugged her shoulders. Martin's mother continued to express admiration for the girl's talent. "You can make money on it. Such practices are in trend today. Thank you, Lisa, for your advice. But my plans do not include shamanism." The hostess shook her lips unhappily. "Don't be so sure. Maiden, don't you know what lies ahead? It is possible that your abilities will help you survive one day." Surprisingly, the woman's words proved prophetic. One day, Molly came home, but could not open the door of her apartment because the key did not want to enter the keyhole. The girl threw with irritation. "What nonsense," and squeezed the bell button with force. The door was opened by an old acquaintance, Vanessa. She also wrinkled her nose. "It's you, Molly. We decided to change the lock. There's a lot of shady people hanging around the entryway." The girl tried to mentally calm herself down, although inside the volcano was rolling without saying a word. She went to her room, but it was a shambles. Molly shouted, "What is this?" Edwards appeared from the bathroom. He wore his robe open, but he wasn't even embarrassed to see his stepdaughter. "Our gypsy has arrived." "What are we yelling?" Molly said. "My room. Why is it such a mess? And why did you change the lock?" William was pleased with the result of his actions, because he managed to break the resistance of this stubborn girl. He'd shown her who was boss in this apartment. Now it remains to enjoy his victory. The man gritted his teeth. "This is no longer your room. My wife Vanessa will now be in charge of this apartment." Molly felt her breath catching. She said in a low voice, "Daddy, how are you? After all, it's only been 3 months since Mom died." Edwards laughed in her face. "I don't care about convention, and don't call me Dad. I hope you're not so dumb that you don't realize you have nothing more to do in this apartment." Vanessa shifted her gaze fearfully from Molly to William. Her well-groomed face was contorted in a grimace of fear. At the peak of passion, Molly again heard her mother's voice, which predicted the impostor's doom. In a ringing voice, she said, "You rejoiced too soon. Mr. Edwards, it is written on your fate to be an eternal widower and your days. You'll end up in an asylum for the mentally ill. Get out of here, witch." William clenched his fists and moved on the girl, but Molly managed to get Yurka out through the open door. About an hour she wandered around the city and only then decided to call Magtip. The young man listened to her and firmly said, "Do not even think. Come to us." There was nowhere to go, and Molly accepted the young man's offer. She did not refuse Magtipu when he made her a marriage proposal. Soon the young people signed, and life began to improve little by little. But despite her unique abilities, the girl did not know that the most difficult tests were ahead of her. Zach was cranky in the morning, so Molly was worried about the state of health of her son. Over these few years, she had learned not only to identify diseases almost without error, but also to select the most effective ways of healing. The young woman stretched out her hands and to the mother of little fancies, "Show me where you have a pain." The boy touched his forehead and hummed. Molly touched her lips to the baby's head. "Oh, I think we've forgiven it all a little bit because Zach doesn't listen to Mommy. When it's cold outside, you have to wear a hat. Don't you like hats? That's okay. Now Mommy will give you milk with honey and the cold will run away." The little boy asked in surprise. "It will run away and hide, like that aunt who came to see us yesterday." "Son, are you confused? No one came to our house yesterday." The boy was stubbornly insistent. "My aunt came, and I saw her from the window. She was hiding over there." The boy pointed to the barn. "I wanted to tell her it was wrong to peek, but I couldn't because she ran away." Molly pulled her son close to her and smacked his hot forehead again. "You imagined all this because you're sick. Don't worry, we won't let anyone in with you." The boy echoed, "We won't let anyone in." The young mother went to the kitchen to prepare a warm drink for the child. But at that moment, a shadow flashed outside the window, and Zach shrieked, "Mommy, she's here again." Molly jumped outside and looked around. She clearly felt the presence of a stranger. Grabbing a pitchfork in her hands, the woman went to the barn. "Who's hiding in there? You better come out, or I might hurt unintentionally." For persuasiveness, Molly shook the pitchfork from the yellowed thickets and weeds. A woman's voice was heard. First, a woman's head emerged from the grass, then the observant fully marked out in space. Molly exclaimed, "Julia Jones. What are you doing here, and why are you hiding in my yard?" The young woman began to grow diligently. "Tied up the ringleaders. It's the elderly blades of grass wanted to see the witch doctor." Jacob led the space of the yard perplexed look. "And what's so interesting?" Uninvited guests desperately waved her hand. "I'm not interested in your houses. I wanted to look at the boy. Does he really look like my Sam?" "What are you talking about?" Molly realized that Lucy had spread the gossip around the village. She wasn't going to justify herself to that poor woman. A husband who never missed a woman's skirt. Jones continued to rub it in, and the witch doctor looked at her piercingly, minting every word. "My son has a father and your Sam has nothing to do with his birth." Julia tried to object, but he came to see you several times. "How did you just move in with the woman of faith?" "That's right, but I'm not the one who treated your husband." "How can you blindly believe rumors like that? You're an educated woman and it's not hard to calculate. When I moved here and when I had Zach, it didn't prove anything." Now doctors are nursing premature babies, Molly impatiently interrupted Julia. "My son was born overweight, so all your suspicions are unfounded." Chasing Lucy and other gossip. "Okay, Julia, I don't have time for this." But Jones wasn't going to leave. "Show me your boy, I want to make sure." This demand angered the young mother. "This isn't a circus or a museum to show off. My child is sick, and I'm not going to disturb him. Go home, Julia. Don't make me go to extreme measures." Jones reluctantly headed for the entrance. She turned around several times before leaving the stranger's yard. Molly noticed the woman's bloodless lips moving. She thought regretfully, "It must be clinging to me. And why are people willing to believe any word spoken? Why won't they trust the voice of reason?" After the bread drink, Zach felt better and fell asleep. Molly sat beside the crib, her son immersed in his thoughts. "My little boy, how like your father are you? But I don't want you to turn out to be a scoundrel like him." Molly's marital bliss lasted only 2 months. After their modest wedding with Martin unexpectedly died Lola, and her husband's mother drastically changed her attitude to the young daughter-in-law Lisa. She didn't hesitate to air her grievances with the girl. "It's your fault. Did not save my mommy from death. Left a soothsayer. You're a liar, not a healer." The woman usually made such accusations when Martin wasn't at home. She was afraid of her son's reaction and tried to keep her emotions in check. But everything changed after Martin went on a long business trip. Before he left, he reassured his young wife, Molly. "I'll be gone for a month or 2. Our company is opening a branch in the Sverdlovsk region, and my team will have to provide the technical part. But we have all experienced specialists who are real pros, so we'll manage." In a minimum of time, the young woman had a bad feeling and asked her husband, Martin, "Can't you stay? My heart is troubled." He hugged her affectionately. "Don't fill your head with bad thoughts. We'll be fine, and you can call me anytime." "I will. I'll take you at your word. I'll bore you with my calls every day." The very next day, she dialed her husband's number, but he didn't answer. For a whole week, the young woman tried to contact Martin, but heard only the soulless voice of the answering machine. "Call her out. Call back later." Then she was told that such a number did not exist at all. She could only hope that Martin would call her himself. But as the days went by, her cell phone gave no sign of life except total incomprehension. What had happened to Martin? Worrying was her mother-in-law's attitude. She became irritable and rebuked her daughter-in-law for the slightest misstep. Subsequently, Martin's mother began to ignore her daughter-in-law's presence. As soon as Molly showed up in the kitchen, Lisa would defiantly leave, emphasizing with her behavior that she did not want to talk to her. This went on for about a week. Molly sensed that a storm was brewing, and she wasn't wrong. One evening, Lisa didn't come home in an agitated state, and from the doorstep began to shout, "Molly, where are you? Come here. There is a serious conversation." The girl had to obey her mother-in-law's demand. She went out into the hallway and immediately smelled the odor of booze. This fact shocked the girl, because Lisa was very careful about her health. She always refused wine, even on holidays. Noticing that the daughter-in-law wrinkled Mother Martin, critically remarked that she did not like it. "I don't like a lot of things either, but I have to put up with it. For example, your presence in this house pisses me off. Tell me how long you're going to sit here waiting for who knows what." "Lisa, why are you doing this?" "I'm waiting for Martin. He's my lawfully wedded husband." The woman burst out laughing. "He had a platoon of wives like that before him. Do you really believe in fairy tales? My son is not your type. That's not the kind of wife he wants. Let him decide what kind of wife he wants." The mother-in-law came so close that the girl felt her breath on her face. "Listen to me, beautiful. Has it not yet reached your native brains that Martin regrets his hasty wife, and that's why he doesn't answer you? By the way, he called me the day before yesterday. Told me he's gonna be delayed another month." Molly held her breath. "Lisa, he asked about me." "He did. He wondered if you moved out of this apartment yet. I'd really like to hear the answer to that question too, because your presence in this house really annoys me. What are you here for, anyway? Your services are not needed. And if you're going to live on someone else's dime, that's not going to work. So find an apartment. And the sooner you do it, the better. I'll even give you some money. Given your hopeless situation, go to your relatives. After all, you have aunties and grandmothers." Lisa took out 2 bills of the highest denomination. "I hope you and I understand each other." There was a hammer pounding in her head, and the sound made her very dizzy. Molly began to hastily gather her things. Before her eyes flashed the face of her mother-in-law, distorted with hatred, and in her ears those nasty dots. Her words sounded, "Look for an apartment. That's not the kind of wife my son needs." Martin called to me, smearing tears and despair on her cheeks. A young woman whispered to her. "He called me because he was afraid, and I was such a naive fool. I wanted to make them happy with the news that we were having a baby." Molly had only recently found out she was pregnant, but she had been hesitant to tell her mother-in-law. "It's okay. I'll be fine on my own. We don't need anyone." In that critical situation, she felt for the first time united with her unborn child. Trying not to make any noise, she left her husband's apartment and headed for the train station. She already knew that she would buy a ticket to Native Village. Wendy wouldn't chase me away. I have nowhere else to go. Just the day after Molly arrived at the village across the creek, news spread throughout the neighborhood that a distant relative had settled in. Wendy treated people with herbs, but she selected the formulas based solely on the complaints of visitors. The old lady's granddaughter had different diagnostic methods. Molly could identify a diseased organ with a touch of her hand. Over time, she learned to control her unique abilities and the accuracy of her diagnosis. Amazed even medics, who sometimes turned to her for help. But the popularity of the young witch doctor did not many became across the throat. Questionable activities of a young woman attracted the attention and representatives of law enforcement. One day, Molly visited the district police officer and advised you to get a job because people are different. They say I have no complaints against you. Live as you like, but I have to respond to complaints. Go to the poultry farm. There's always a shortage of labor there. Molly thanked the district officer for his advice and was soon on the payroll. While Wendy was alive, she worked in shifts. But after the death of a relative, the question of where to put the child came up. And here again, kind people helped. The company allocated a place in a kindergarten for a single mom. It remained only to rejoice in life. Envious, ill-wishers have already hatched a plan of revenge, strangers who dared to break the established order in their promised corner. No sooner had Julia Jones left the house. The healer, as she noticed not in the distance painfully familiar male figure out of rage. The woman whispered, "Oh, you ghastly," to this Vedi me poured, "but nothing, I'll arrange you." Love comforts together will be on a hot griddle tumbling, trying not to give away his presence. My jealousy is unbearable. Woman sneaked into her house. The children rushed to her with questions. "Mom, where have you been? Dad came to ask for you, and we don't know what to say." Julia automatically asked her daughter, "And where is Daddy now?" "Where is he?" "He went to work. He just left without waiting for you. His car broke down. It needs to be repaired. I made him some sandwiches because Daddy said he'd be late." The woman listened to her daughter, and in her head a plan of revenge was already brewing. She muttered, "It's a good thing Daddy will be back late." The daughter looked at her mother in surprise. "Mom, you seem strange today. You're scolding Daddy for being in the workshops all day, but you're saying it's a good thing." Julia whispered at her daughter and went about her chores. She could hardly wait until evening when it was quite dark. The woman slipped out of the house. She brought her bag with her, which she tried to carry very carefully. She stepped carefully past the Negros houses and disappeared into the night. All day long, Molly had not gotten the visits of Julia Jones out of her mind either. "I still don't understand why that woman came. And she was behaving strangely. Can jealousy turn a mother of two into such a hunted creature? It's just an unsubstantiated rumor. I've only seen that Sam a few times, and that was in public after dinner. A woman was about to do laundry, but the old lady next door came in. 'Molly, baby, look at my leg. You've got eyes like x-rays.' The old woman was leaning on a crooked branch and barely had a ferret, so she sat her down on a stool. 'And where did you get it?' The old woman began to wail. 'She's getting old. Her eyes are failing. She was doing her chores at home. Dana hit a corner. It hurts like hell. I wish it wasn't broken. I'd be dead.' Kelly, like many old people in the village, had no relatives. Well, they had relatives, but they lived far away. Therefore, any illness, or even a minor injury for such people seemed a disaster. The healer tried to calm the grandmother. 'You still live to 100 years. You don't have a fracture, but you were wrong. I'm going to give you a little treatment.' Molly took a jar of herbal ointment out of the cupboard and applied the composition liberally to the bruised long areas. Then she put a bandage on her leg. 'That's it. You'll feel better soon.' Kelly began to thank the woman. 'You have a good heart to help people. God bless you.' The old woman took a jar of ointment and, leaning on a stick, headed for the entrance. 'Kelly, let me walk you out.' Molly drove her patient almost to the house and then returned. Until late in the afternoon, she did her housework. The uneasiness that had appeared in the afternoon did not go away. This unpleasant feeling only grew stronger by the minute. And the woman tried to understand the reason for its appearance, but her thoughts each time returned to the morning incident. She put Zach to bed and was about to go to bed herself. Suddenly, the image of her mother appeared very clearly before her eyes. 'Don't sleep, daughter. You can't sleep.' Molly ran her hands over her face, as if trying to remove the obsession, but it didn't help. Then the woman went to the window. She wanted to open the window a little to let in some fresh air, but at that moment, a column of flame erupted from the side. Not yet realizing what had happened, the young woman rushed to the crib. She managed to jump out into the street when Baba Faith's flimsy house was completely engulfed in flames. Zach cradled her mother's skinny body. 'Mommy, I'm scared.' 'Don't be afraid, son, I'm with you.' Instead of fire people ran away, but mostly it was old people who couldn't help. When the firemen arrived, the home village was just a smoking ruin. Molly stood at a loss, not knowing what to do. Elderly Gawkers had already managed to scatter to their homes, and no one cared about the young mother with a baby in her arms. She tucked her son into the blanket and wandered off to meet the dispersing. Mused dawned. Jacob disliked night duty to the point of toothache, but he disliked middle-of-the-night calls even more. This night, he wasn't destined to enjoy pleasant visions either. Because in the morning, the phone was ringing off the hook. It was the duty nurse from the emergency room. "Jacob, urgently need your consultation." Jacob grumbled unhappily. "Is something burning?" "You couldn't wait until morning." The girl grinned. "There was a fire today, but not at our place. Someone's house burned down across the river, but there were no casualties." "Who'd want to come in the middle of the night?" "A woman from around here. It's a bad situation with her arm." "All right, I'll be right there. Get a small or ready just in case." "I'm all set." I could hear a woman crying on the phone. Jacob said in his heart, "They take it to the extreme and then they cry. What kind of people?" The man quickly dressed and jumped outside. The morning fog completely enveloped the small town. The sight was stunning, but Jacob had no time to admire the beautiful scenery. Duty was calling him. He hurried towards the hospital, not expecting to meet anyone on the deserted street. Suddenly, he noticed in the square near the hospital an incomprehensible movement. At first, Jacob wanted to run past this suspicious object, but heard a child crying. The man thought with irritation that people can't sleep. They're dragging children with them. He came closer and only then realized that the object of his concern was a young woman with a baby in her arms. Jacob asked if you were in trouble. The voice replied yes. "Our house burned down and my son and I are now left on the street." Jacob remembered the conversation with the nurse from the emergency room. "So you're the burned out people from across the river? Do you have any acquaintances or relatives?" "No one, and everything burned down." "I didn't even have time to bring my papers." "What am I going to do with you?" "I don't have time to arrange anything for you." The man thought for a second, but then he exclaimed happily, "I don't know your name. Sweet young lady, but here's a solution to your problem. I'll give you the keys to the house where I live. It's not far from here, near the store. You'll wait for me. Then we'll figure out what to do together. Unfortunately, I can't spare your time right now because I'm in a hurry to go to surgery." Jacob gave the young woman the keys and headed toward the hospital. Lucy sat on the couch in the emergency room and rocked her growing arm like a child. The woman's condition was worsening by the hour, and the swelling had spread all the way to her shoulder. Lucy was crying her eyes out. "Why didn't I listen? She told me the day before yesterday to run to the hospital, and I didn't listen. Now I'm gonna die." In the prime of life, Jacob heard the last words of the woman and cheerfully said, "Do not even dream. We will not let you die. We will save you now." Lucy tried to rise from the couch, but the wild pain nailed her to the seat. "I'm not the one who can't stand my hanging cats anymore. You're the one who's going to cut my arm." Jacob patted the woman on the shoulder. "We'll look at your arm first and then decide what to do. Cutting something off isn't a problem, so we'll figure out how to avoid losing it. Hey guys, help a woman to the dressing room." This request was addressed to the duty shift of the emergency room. A young nurse together with an orderly picked up Lucy from both sides, and the patient began to wail even louder. "Why didn't I listen? She warned me." Jacob inquired, "You're always talking about some kind of witch doctor. If I understand you correctly, you have been treated with folk methods before." "No doctor didn't. I had that damn splinter in me over 2 weeks ago. Everything was fine. And then my palm started to swell up and I couldn't save it. I went to a witch doctor across the river. She lives as a nurse," interrupted a patient. "Jenya has a house. Bauki Faith this night burned down." Lucy, the palm of her healthy hand covered her mouth. "My mother is a woman." Apparently put down the young witch doctor. "Jacob is already a little accustomed to the local lingo, and you have suspicions about it?" Lucy shook his head. "Maybe I do, but I won't." "Why are you slandering people for nothing?" The nurse noticed. "You be right. I have never believed in all sorts of things, and I have never gone to a witch doctor. It's safer and safer to go to a certified specialist. Jacob looked at the girl carefully. You're wrong. You can't deny the possibility of unconventional practices. I too, in my youth, I thought all this quackery. But then myself got into trouble and saved me a local uncle with a tambourine Jacob and removed from the hand Lucy and bandage and shook his head. Oh, you got your arm all messed up. We'll have to operate. Having calmed down, it was. Lucy started wailing loudly again. Doctor, I can't bear the pain. I assure you, you won't even feel it because we'll give you an injection. Within an hour, the operation was over. Am I alive or am I dreaming? Jacob was cheering up the patient. It's okay, and you're still on the ground. But you're going to have to stay with us for a few days because there could be complications. We're treating you. Then you'll go home, a promise that soothed the pain-stricken woman. I'd do anything to save my arm. The nurse on duty began to register the patient for inpatient treatment. Jacob looked at his watch. Wow, it's 8:30. Time to go to work. The surgeon was already heading to his department, but suddenly remembered about the girl who had the keys to the house. He asked the nurse, "If you don't mind, tell mine that I'll be a little late for half an hour, no more." Of course, Jacob will run home. Have some tea after such a restless night. It is not a sin to rest. Jacob hurried home because he didn't like to be late for work. He didn't consider night duty an excuse and hoped to be home in time for the general hospital meeting. The door of the house was open, and the man, trying not to make any noise, made his way into the large room. His guests were asleep on the couch, and he was able to get a good look at their facial features. A young woman suddenly gleamed something, and the man shifted his gaze to the nightstand and was stunned. He saw the woman's jewelry, a small pendant in the form of a locket. There was no way this thing was in this girl's possession. Jacob touched the young woman's hand, and Molly opened her eyes with difficulty. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I'd fallen asleep. The man had already completely mastered himself, and I just want to ask you one question. Tell me, where did you get this pendant? The girl said sadly, it was my mother's jewelry. It's the only thing I have in memory of her. Jacob felt his mouth dry with excitement in his voice. He asked your mom's name by chance, Betty. The girl fluttered her eyelashes in surprise. Yes, Edward's Betty. He couldn't hold back his emotions any longer. Edwards. So it was you. So she tricked me then. But why? Molly looked fearfully at the man, who had his arms wrapped around his head in despair. She did not understand anything, but was afraid to question this man. Terrible fear for herself and her son again. Sticky paws touched her heart. Perhaps we better leave. Molly began to wake her son. Zach, wake up, sweetheart. Jacob sank down on the couch without strength. Don't you have to leave? My daughter, stay here. This is your home now. I have so much to tell you, but I have to get my thoughts together. Jacob had completely forgotten his duty as a doctor. He sat on the couch and could not take his eyes off the night guest who had come into his life so unexpectedly. Zach looked at the adults and didn't understand what was happening to them. He looked at his mother, then at the owner of the house. You're my grandfather. The stupor fell away. And Jacob confidently answered, yes, little boy. He cradled the boy against him and clutched him. Eyes too stingy male tears rolled down his cheeks. But Jacob was not embarrassed by these tears because they were tears of happiness. Episodes from the past often surfaced in Jacob's mind. But for more than a quarter of a century, he had diligently banished them. Once he had already drawn the final line beyond which his past remained. And he never wanted to go back there again. But the appearance of a young witch doctor with a baby made the man change his principles. And for the first time in many years, he allowed himself to return to the place where his youthful dreams and first love remained. With William Edwards. They had been friends since first grade, and this friendship was approved by both boys' parents and teachers. Because Jacob possessed the qualities of a leader, and William tried to imitate him in everything, so their relationship often resembled a competition. But until the time of endless dueling did not tolerate serious disagreements. Only sometimes William would wistfully remark, Jacob, you're a real lucky man. No matter how hard I try, I can't do it. His comrade answered him everything, because you try to repeat after others, showing your individual qualities, and immediately feel different. Jacob tried to follow his friend's advice, but he still did not succeed. Around the 9th grade, he decided to succeed in another way. He started spreading rumors about him behind his friend's back. When Jacob realized who was the source of the gossip, he gave his friend his first warning. "Look, William, this is not manly. If it happens again, you can forget you have a friend." Edwards was quiet for a while, but jealousy lurked beneath the boy's heart. Despite the fact that relations between friends cooled a little, William also applied to medical school. Surprisingly, but both guys got in at the first go. Jacob took the event with reserve. Edwards, on the other hand, was triumphant. "You and I are destined to be together for life. I can already imagine how you and I will become surgeons and work in a good clinic." Jacob decided to tease his comrade, but district hospitals are not a prospect for an aspiring doctor. "Edwards, I don't get it." Jokes waved 2 hands, did not get burned at once. "This is definitely not for me. My daddy won't let his only son miss out somewhere in the middle of nowhere." Jacob, in a constructive tone, said a real doctor must go through all the stages of formation. Only then can he become a true professional. Although William disagreed, he did not argue with his comrade. The silent man swallowed his resentment when Jacob, not him, had been elected the head of the group at the general meeting. The appearance of a favorite girl in the life of a friend's friend was the most stressful for the jealous. Betty was getting a lot of attention from a lot of guys, but she only let herself be courted by Jacob. William secretly suffered because he also liked this girl. After Jacob started dating Betty, and Jacob was basically left out. Then he remembered the old and already personally proven method of gossip. But having learned from bitter experience, the boy was now acting smarter. He acted very carefully and mostly through third parties. Therefore, it was almost impossible to identify the source. Thanks to the efforts of William at the university, spread rumors that Jacob likes to drink and booze. Such behavior of the university administration could not leave without attention. Jacob was summoned to the dean's office and reprimanded in full form. He was given a warning. "Keep in mind, Jacob, one more such signal, and you can take away your documents." No matter how much the guy tried to slander, to justify himself, no one wanted to listen to him, although he guessed who was the culprit of his troubles. There was no proof. In order to completely eliminate problems in the future, Jacob terminated all relations with Edwards. He even rented a room so that he wouldn't have to face the envious students in the dormitory. But William was not deterred. He decided to come in from the other flank, namely to make his accomplices and his friend's girlfriend. But Betty quickly figured him out. "Look, William, you've got the wrong girl. I'm used to believing only the facts, so you're not going to get away with this. Don't waste your time. Do something useful. Take up ballroom dancing or go to the library." No girl had ever humiliated William in such a way, but the narcissistic young man didn't know how to take revenge on those who made him suffer. The opportunity came unexpectedly, approached the end of studies, and every future medic made plans for life. Before receiving their diplomas, the graduates were offered a little work in the organization of the Red Cross. The first to sign up was Edwards. He excitedly told his classmates about the prospects of participating in the mission. "Guys, this is a great launching pad." A knowledgeable person assured me that later all participants would be given special certificates. And in general, to visit abroad for free. It's the limit of dreams. Many alumni took the bait. Jacob was one of them. Only he had a very different agenda. He thought the peacekeeping mission would give him a chance to gain useful experience as an aspiring surgeon. When Betty found out Jacob was going to Africa, she was shocked. "Jacob, do you realize how serious this is? It's very dangerous. Boyfriend to girlfriend. He won't send us somewhere too hot. I've already found out our group is going to one of the poorest countries. We'll take vaccines and necessary medical supplies there to provide medical care to the people. As soon as I get back, you and I will definitely cut the wedding short." "Why didn't you tell me before? I would have gone with you too. There's nothing for girls to do there. So there's still danger, and you're lying to me." "Betty, you know there's danger everywhere. Even crossing the road is scary because not everyone follows the rules. There were 17 people in their group, and they put Edwards in charge. This was William's finest hour. He gave out commands left and right, which caused laughter and obscene jokes. Upon arrival at their destination, the future doctors immediately began to work Jacob, and 2 other guys were sent to remote settlements. But they did not reach the place. On the way to the settlement, they were ambushed. 1 guy was killed, and Jacob was seriously wounded. All the valuable cargo was taken by local bandits. They also tied up the 3rd boy and took him with them. Scraps of their conversations, Jacob realized that the bandits were going to get a ransom for the prisoner. That terrible day he remembered for the rest of his life. He was bleeding on the road with no hope of rescue. Gathering his last strength, Jacob gave himself first aid, which helped to stop the bleeding. After that, he lost consciousness. He woke up in a dwelling resembling a tent. People were discussing quietly and pointing at him. Soon a short man in brightly colored rags jumped up. He began to examine Jacob's wound and at the same time loudly faltered his tongue. The boy realized that his affairs were not good at all. After examining the local shaman, Jacob ate some potions, and he fell into unconsciousness. He lost track of the days, so he did not know how much time had passed since his disappearance. When he became quite well, 2 men from the tribe put him on some kind of battery and took him to the nearest town. There he learned that he had been a guest of the local tribe for 3 whole months. He was also told that he had been presumed dead for all those months. It was a real shock. Jacob was afraid to even imagine the upcoming meeting with his fiancée. But everything turned out to be obscenely trivial. Betty did not faint, but only slightly pale. And then the most amazing thing happened. His fiancée was not happy, but on the contrary, began to reproach him that he had not found a way to inform her that he was alive and well. "And I believed you, and you turned out to be like this." She didn't get a chance to say who he really was, because the final scene was the appearance of William Edwards. Jacob pulled his eyes out. "What are you doing here?" William gave him a friendly pat on the shoulder. "I'm glad you're alive. Honestly, very glad. But sorry, old boy, things have changed while you've been traveling in Africa. Betty and I got married last week. It was a beautiful wedding. Too bad you didn't get a chance to have any fun." Jacob didn't remember how he got to the apartment he and Betty had rented before the upcoming wedding. His thoughts were all jumbled up in his head, and at that moment, he wanted more than anything to drink himself into unconsciousness. The only person who was willing to give him a shoulder to lean on was Andrew. "Hang in there, Jacob. You are a man and must be ready for any trials." The next day, Jacob left town, where his first love and his dashed hopes for happiness remained. Molly looked at the man who was telling her such incredible things. "I gave this pendant to your mother after our first serious, if I may say so, meeting. The only thing I don't understand is, why didn't she tell me?" Molly shook her head. "What makes you so sure I'm not William's daughter?" Jacob found the strength to laugh. "I'll show you one picture now, and you'll understand everything yourself." He put Zach, who had already climbed into his lap, on the floor and opened the closet. He searched for something for a long time, finally handed her the picture. Zach looked in and smiled. "You poked your finger and said, 'That's me, Mom,' when we took the picture. And that's the jacket I don't remember." Molly was afraid to believe it. She could feel the tears coming out of her eyes. "So we are not alone in this world, that we have someone else." Jacob smiled. "Not just anyone, my father and grandfather. By the way, quite a successful surgeon at your hospital." Molly looked at him confused. "What are we all going to do now?" Jacob looked at his watch. "So that's how I'm going to work. I'm sorry to leave you, but now we'll definitely have time to talk. Then I'll take some time off, and we'll be sure to get back to the paperwork and the fire investigation. Anything you can find here is at your disposal. You don't miss me, do you? I'll try to get out in time." He moved toward the door, then stopped, smiled. "I have a very strange feeling right now. I'm basically all alone in this world already, and now I have a family. It's so unusual, so strange, but very joyful." Jacob came out Molly, spinning around the house and holding Zach in her arms. "Zach, we have a daddy, and you have a grandfather. You know, he didn't leave anyone behind. It was all this one." Molly furrowed her brow. She already knew that William's new wife had been hit by a car, and now her ex-father was grooming a new woman. But nothing. As long as the rope didn't twist. That voice forced. Molly grinned. Her mom had never fooled her. By some coincidence. In the afternoon, the chief of the local police department had been admitted with a trivial appendicitis. He kept wiping sweat from his forehead. Jacob asked, "Why are you so nervous?" "By virtue of your profession, it seems to me that you have come face to face with criminals more than once." The man grinned unhappily. "Jacob, I know what to expect from a criminal. I can anticipate what's going to happen. But I'll be sleeping here, if I understand correctly. So I won't be able to influence the course of events." Jacob looked at him with interest. "That's an interesting point of view, but you can't be so distrustful of those around you. Maybe that's what I learned there." Jacob immediately understood what the man was talking about. "But if you have more trust." "I was there too, but not for long. Our supply train was ambushed. One doctor was killed. I was badly wounded, so the bandits assumed I was dead. But they took one young doctor kid with them. I guess they wanted a ransom. I never found out anything about him. They just told me not to go where I didn't want to go." The chief of police held out his hand. "Leo, believe it or not. But I feel a lot better now. I trust you." The operation went quickly and without complications. 2 hours later, Leo woke up in his room. His consciousness was still hazy, but he could hear someone talking not far from him. "Leo, the jokes are over. You were saved this time, but the next ones might not make it. Leo's in the room with you now. As soon as he feels better, I'll be sure to ask him to send you for treatment." "What are you talking about? I'm not an alcoholic. I'm a free man." At the same second, there was a slap, and a man's voice said, "Oh, I'm Leo. I'm telling you quite seriously." Leo grinned to himself. Wow, they're already scaring grown men with it. When breathing became easier, and he could even get out of bed, Leo called his old friend. "I have a case. Remember that medical supply wagon that was ambushed? A man from that convoy operated on me yesterday. I realize that the case is long closed, but I remember you talking about wanting to dig privately." The police chief listened for about 5 minutes, then nodded his head. "It's a deal. Call me to meet you." Jacob first wanted to run home, but then realized that you cannot come empty-handed to his grandson, or his daughter either. This is all so unusual. Grandson, daughter. Even the language. Even his brain was cautiously saying these words, as if afraid that everything would turn out to be untrue. He drove to the largest mall in the city. Jacob quietly opened the door of the house. Who knows, maybe Zach is asleep. But no, Zach was not only awake. He seemed to be waiting for him, because he immediately rushed over to him. Jacob threw all the bags on the floor and picked up his grandson, who clung to him trustingly. Molly looked around at the purchases. "Oh, did you guys clean out the store? Let's make a deal. No kick out. I realize it's hard for you to call me Dad right away, but I hope that moment will come someday." Molly nodded her head in embarrassment. "I'll try." Jacob set Zach on the floor and commanded, "Let's take it apart. I hope I got the dimensions right." Molly shook her head. "Dinner first. Everything else later." Zach had eaten everything the fastest and was now looking longingly at the brightly colored box that peeked out from the pile of bags. There was obviously something very interesting in there, and obviously for him. Molly smiled as she looked at her son. She understood what he was going through. "Thank you, Molly. I can't remember the last time I had anything other than sandwiches and wheat when I got home from work." "Well, now it's on." Jacob sat on the couch and watched Zach's already calm demeanor. The big machine. The kid's eyes were burning. He hadn't parted with it all evening and then into bed. Molly had barely taken the machine out of his hands when he was already asleep. Jacob was drinking coffee, waiting for his daughter. They had so much to discuss. Molly had just entered the room when there was a knock on the door. Jacob wondered what it was like to be brought in at this hour. He usually got a call from the hospital. Standing on the doorstep was a grim Sam Jones. Molly immediately frowned. Why did he come to apologize? "You fool, she told me everything. She's crying to me. She's afraid that she'll go to jail, but she won't. Molly turned away, signaling that the conversation was over. But Sam wasn't going to leave. He sat down on a chair and spoke. "I don't know how I'm going to live my life, and my jealousy. I would have left a long time ago, but this way she'll take it out on the kids." Molly turned to him. "Is it your fault she's so jealous of you?" Sam raised his head at her. "But I didn't do anything wrong." "Yes, you did. You just don't notice it. But she does, and she sees that you're worse off at home than you are at work. Think about what I said if you want to keep your family together." Sam sat for another 5 minutes, then got up, put a thick wad of money on the table. "Molly, no offense to you. I realize you can't buy a house with this money, but you're all out of stuff." Sam left, and Jacob looked at his daughter in surprise. "And I don't understand everything now. Did he set your house on fire?" "No. His wife is our village gossip. So we should go to the police." "No need to go to the police. She's already punished herself. It's not her fault. She's just stupid and listens to nonsense." Jacob shook his head. "You are just like your mother, always for justice, for good justice. Tell me how you ended up in the village. It's a long story of a lifetime." Molly poured herself some tea and sat down in front of her father. They talked half the night. Jacob was indignant several times and said he should be nailed. First it was William, and then Martin. Looking at his watch, Jacob said 2 hours and go to bed. "I'll stay up a little longer." He went outside, breathing in more air. If things hadn't worked out this way then and now, things would be different. Leo, having learned what problems Jacob has in the family, immediately said, "Today, go to the office. They will take care of your documents. I'll call. Everything will be done quickly, in a week." Molly looked at the new passport with a smile. "Well, it's a thing to celebrate. I have to work tomorrow. I'm out of vacation time." Molly began to set the table. But then there was a knock at the door. "Yes, come in." On the doorstep stood a strange man a little older than Jacob. There was something about the man's gaze that was so forgotten yet familiar. "Good evening. I'm sorry to bother you. I'm a friend of Leo's. I very much like to talk to you, Jacob." "Well, come in." "No, if you don't mind, let's go for a walk. Your daughter doesn't need to hear our conversation." Jacob looked at Molly confused, but put on his jacket. They got out and walked to the river. "The thing is, the guy who was taken prisoner is a very good friend of mine. You know, there were so many investigations, but nobody dug up anything. I'm retired from the force, but now I'm in private practice, and I can afford to get back into the business when Jacob came back." Molly looked at him questioningly. "He only said that. It's about our service. And William, he was there too, wasn't he? But to be honest, I was hurt right away. I was treated by a shaman for a long time, so I don't really know anything. And I don't want to. I'm gonna have to go back to those times again. I feel it." The next day, Molly and Zach went to the local store. As luck would have it, Lucy was in the store at the time. Zach, as soon as he saw her, clung to his mother. And Lucy, who was just about to leave, dropped her bag on the floor. "Oh, who's come to the store? Not like for food. What about frogs, whose legs and all?" She laughed at her own joke. Molly let go of her son's hand and moved in on her. "Why do you have so much venom in you? Don't you realize you're poisoning yourself with it? Julia's been spilling all kinds of shit, and now she's going to jail. And if we were asleep, what sin would be on your soul?" Lucy retreated fearfully. "What are you waiting for?" "That I didn't do anything. In fact, I can say what I want to say, and who to believe and what to do is everyone's business." Lucy picked up her bag and headed for the door. Molly just said, "Are you watching what you say? You're sick with anger and venom." Lucy jumped outside, and already from there her threats and curses were heard. Molly smiled sweetly and turned to the saleswoman. Now Molly felt neither fear nor loneliness. She directly physically felt that she had protection behind her. Her father. The clerk looked at Molly fearfully. Their store was on the outskirts of town. You could say it was the end of the town, so everyone knew each other. She'd heard about Molly, too. That evening, her father said to Molly, "I need to go to my hometown. Would you like to buy something?" Molly thought it would be a good idea to go out. Zach had prepared for the trip extensively. Molly and Jacob almost died laughing. When you saw the backpack he packed, no, Zach, that's no good. We can't take that much stuff for him. Zach's right behind the sniffles. But I need all this stuff. Jacob sat down in front of him. Well, then we won't be able to buy you anything because we'll have nowhere to put it. The boy thought for a moment, then quickly began to free his backpack. At the train station, they were met by the same man who had once come to them. Jacob, I will say at once that your story helped me a lot. Some facts became a real missing link. Unfortunately, a friend of mine was killed when he was captured and ransomed. He escaped, but he died in the escape. Now we know who it was that set the enemies upon your wagon. Jacob stretched thoughtfully, so I thought they were waiting for us there for a reason. No, not for nothing. This is a man you know well. And Jacob stared at the man in surprise. You are. This is your boyhood friend, William Edwards. No, it can't be. Yes, he's not a very nice man, but what would it be? There was a lot of money at stake. Jacob, I realized that now the puzzle is finally coming together. And if it was William, then everything was falling into place. An hour later, they were leaving the investigative committee, where Jacob and William had a confrontation. William was crying tears, apologizing to Jacob and Molly. The man caught up with them on the street, handed Molly the keys. Take these keys to the apartment. Are you still registered there? He won't need them for the next 10 years. They were silent for a while. Then Jacob decisively said, let's go to a cafe or a restaurant. We should celebrate. They sat down at a table by the window. Molly smiled because Zach was asking 1,000 questions. Why here? As in a fairy tale. Molly. The young woman flinched, looked up, and saw Martin. Zach immediately felt his mother tense up, pressed himself against her and froze, looking at the stranger. Martin looked at his wife with surprise. Of course, the formerly beloved wife. Strange, had she then exchanged him for this man who was old enough to be her father? And this child, judging by its age, she'd gotten pregnant as soon as she'd run away from him. Martin was still grateful to his mother for being able to open his eyes. True, he hadn't married again yet, despite his mother's best efforts. Hello, Martin. She wanted to hide so she wouldn't see the traitor's face. She didn't know or understand how she felt about this man, but she knew she didn't want to see him. How are you doing, Molly? Martin looked mockingly at Jacob. I guess that's what happiness is to you. I am happy, Martin. I hope you're not suffering in your happy life, too. What kind of hypocrites are you? I believe you were pure, that you love me? Molly raised her eyebrows in surprise. Then she stood up. You're the one calling me, you hypocrite. You've gone off to have fun. You couldn't even tell me yourself that you were fed up with me and asked your mother to kick me out. And then you call me a hypocrite. Martin even took a step back under Molly's pressure. Kicked you out where? What are you talking about? You just decided to justify yourself. She turned around and sat back down. Martin wanted to say something else, but Jacob stood in front of him, a young man. Would you please leave us? My daughter doesn't want to talk to you, and my grandson is afraid of you. Martin cast one last glance at Lisa and quickly moved toward the exit. Now he wanted to get to his mother and ask some questions. Molly was silent for a long time, then raised her eyes to Jacob. He asked, I take it that this is Zach's father. Yes, Dad. I've seen his face somewhere, but I can't remember. He's a biochemist. He seems pretty good. Maybe even accomplished something. Jacob slapped himself on the forehead. That's right. I read his article. I thought he was very knowledgeable. Meanwhile, Martin was carrying everything back to his mother after Molly left him. He came back and moved out on Mom. True, she was adamantly opposed to it, but that didn't bother him much. He'd rather have her bothering him about nothing. But it was unbearable to live with her. Mom. Lisa came out of the room. Martin, why are you screaming like a victim? Mom, we need to talk. What we need to talk about. What could be so important? That you went to visit your mother and saw Molly. The woman shuddered, then quite indifferently said, I'm glad, and I had nothing to do with it. Mother, tell me how Molly left me. And who she left with. Lisa jerked her shoulder. God, I've got nothing better to do. Only how to keep in your head such nonsense will you run. Martin stood in front of his mother. "Mom, the jokes are over. I saw Molly, I saw her son, who could be my age. She doesn't have a wedding ring, she doesn't look like a walking woman. Which makes me think you have something to tell me." Lisa. Somehow she looked at her son at once. She had never seen him in such a state. Jacob and his family returned home in the late afternoon. The day had been so full that Zach had long since fallen asleep in his grandfather's arms. "Molly, you go to bed. I'm on duty tomorrow too." "Yes, Dad, you go. I'll do all the work here myself." Molly looked at the shopping pile. Zach's grandfather's budget had been shaken up pretty badly today. He didn't ask for anything, by the way, just stared with huge eyes at anything. And Grandpa's already running out to buy it. It's time to go back to work at the daycare center. There was a quiet knock on the window. Molly looked out and saw Julia, the same one who had set her house on fire. Sighing, she threw on her sweater and went outside. Julia immediately threw herself at her feet. "Molly, I'm so sorry. I don't know how it all happened. As if someone was pushing me. I've done something that I don't know how to live." Sam is embarrassing to look at in front of the kids. "Calm down, you're rereading. No one died at the funeral. And that's already good." Julia sat down on the step. "How to live? How to live now?" Molly sat down next to her, usually to live. "Forget everything that happened and start over." "Start how?" "Yeah, Sam won't forgive me. And neither will you. I forgave you a long time ago. I'm grateful in some ways. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have found my father." Julia looked at her in amazement. "The news surgeon is your father." Yes, Molly was well aware that tomorrow the whole small town would know about it. But she decided to go with it. They'd find out sooner or later anyway, so let it be sooner so there would be less gossip. Molly turned around. Sam was standing at the door. Julia jumped up. "Sam, what are you doing here?" He looked at his wife gloomily. "What are you doing here?" "I came to apologize." Sam's voice softened a little. He came in, sat down on the porch. "I bought a trip to the sea. In 3 days we'll go as a family." Julia froze. Molly smiled. She had underestimated Sam. He appeared to have heard her. Sam at sea altogether. They walked tightly holding hands. Molly sat still for a long time, looking up at the sky and smiling. 3 days later, the village was shaken by the news Leo Alcax failed Chagall. While in the hospital, there was nothing to do. Asked his wife to bring from home something he had left from art, and all days long he painted. When the picture was ready, it was seen by one of the patients, who immediately offered Leo to write more paintings for a real exhibition. Leo, telling everyone, said that he no longer drank because great things awaited him. "Jacob, you have a visitor. Is the visitor not a patient?" "No, he doesn't look like a patient. But let him come into the office." Martin came in. He didn't look as great as he did in the cafe. Jacob immediately pressed his lips together, stood up, then obliged. Martin looked at him, "And I came to you for help. I really need your help. What makes you think I'm going to help you?" "Because I don't know why. Maybe because you broke up with Molly's mother for some reason." "Jacob, I don't know why the exchange of belligerent fervor went away. Have a seat now that you're here. I'm listening to Martin. I couldn't start for a long time. Then he started talking. He spoke without any emotion, just laying out one by one the facts he had learned from his mother. By the end of the story, Jacob understood perfectly well that in front of him sat the same victim of deception as he himself had once become. "Martin, even if I agree to help you, there is no guarantee that Molly will forgive you. You realize she's out on the street with no money, no place to live, pregnant." Martin looked up at Jacob. "I mean, I'm right, Zach. My son is yours, of course. Who else would it be? Help me. Just one thing. I need Molly to listen to me." Molly stuffed and dialed the windows. The door slammed and she turned around and froze. It was her father, and behind him stood Martin. What the hell? What was he doing here? Jacob raised his hand. "Molly, we haven't been in contact with you that long, of course. But you know I don't want to hurt you. I'm just asking you to listen to Martin. Then, after you've listened, you can chase him away, even beat him up. Do you think he has something interesting to say? Another incredible story to tell. Or are moms more inclined to tell stories? Martin sullenly remained silent. Then Molly looked at her watch. You have exactly 10 minutes, and that's only because Daddy asked. Jacob stepped out so he wouldn't interrupt the conversation. He was sure that Molly still loved that loner. Except her pride. Half an hour had passed. The house was quiet, and Jacob decided to return. He opened the door and froze. Molly and Martin were standing in the middle of the room, hugging, when they both heard Jacob. Then from Zero and from each other, Jacob laughed. I see our family is getting bigger and bigger. Molly smiled embarrassedly at Dad. What a fool I was. It turns out that Martin is shaking his head stubbornly. No, the biggest fool in this situation is me. Jacob didn't have time to answer anything because his phone rang. It was Andrew. Jacob, how are you? Yeah, I'm fine. Why the mysterious voice? Are they packing their bags? Peter has been dishonorably banished. Is your rightful place waiting for you? Jacob exhaled, that's news, but no muse. But you're an excellent surgeon and neighborhood hospitals are not enough for your scale. Jacob hung up the phone, confused, turned to Molly. Here is back Molly, smiled and hugged him. Daddy, it's good your place in a real hospital. Especially since we've decided to go back too. Jacob raised an eyebrow. Duck, I guess you two should get married. Martin and Molly laughed. Papa, neither of us ever bothered to get a divorce. Many people came to see off the surgeon and Martin and Zach. Even Lucy came, though she didn't come close to everyone. She stood aside. Colleagues arranged Jacob fancy send-off, and today he even has a little headache. Molly saw what was sneaking up on her. Julia is tanned and beautiful. Molly, can I give you a hug? I never realized what an attentive and loving husband I have. Thank you. A car stopped at the gate, and no one got out for a long time. Martin looked at it anxiously. Finally, the door opened and Lisa came into the light. Martin jerked toward her, but Molly held him back. The woman didn't look her best. She leaned against the car and stood like that. Molly approached her. Are you all right? Lisa looked at her and cried. Can you forgive me for being such a fool? When I found out I had a grandson, it turned me upside down. I can't eat. I can't sleep. Molly stared into Lisa's eyes for a long time, trying to find a single drop of deceit, but she couldn't. She smiled afterward. I guess I'll have to forgive you. We're family. Anyone can make a mistake. Martin breathed a sigh of relief. No matter what his mom had done, she was still his mom. And he couldn't turn his back on her anyway. And it would be very hard to choose between Molly and his mom. Martin picked Zach up in his arms and said, Shall we go meet Grandma? Zach's eyes rounded in surprise. And then there are relatives. There are so many. Martin laughed. It happens. And we're also hoping that Mommy will give you a brother or sister. As soon as possible.
Subscribe and click the bell. Any other woman would have been hysterical, but Lisa didn't even cry. When the door closed behind Sebastian forever, only all the days after he'd left, she'd been tormented by a strange sense of guilt. According to the law of the genre, she should be feeling something else entirely. For example, self-pity and hatred for her husband. But no, Lisa's soul was completely calm, and only sometimes a shallow calm ran through the sea. That unpleasant feeling. She kept thinking about the fact that Sebastian would not have left if she had. And then there was a dead end, because the mind refused to answer the question what I had to do to make him stay. All the last few days, Lisa had been trying to answer that question for herself. She realized that her own life and the fate of her children depended on it. The young woman mentally tried to solve the intricate crossword puzzles, patiently going over in her mind every day, which was remembered by something. The small car her parents had given her for her 30th birthday moved confidently through the streets of the evening crash city. It seemed that she was now driving not a stylish hatchback of obscenely bright red color, but her own life, and everything depended on which way she turned at the nearest intersection. Her hand unconsciously reached for the control panel, and a life-affirming tune blared from the speakers. Lisa began to sing along with the singer in some wild performance. The woman did not have vocal data, but it did not prevent her from singing heartily and even making risky vocalizations. Probably, her miniatures were too loud because passing cars persistently honked. But these signs of attention only added to the excitement. "Guys, I'm fine. I'm fine." From the speakers poured booming sounds, and the accident regretfully said aloud, "Good, but not good enough. I never thought I was capable of doing such a thing. But I'm ready to do it again, and I don't care about public opinion. That's the way I've had to keep it all my life. I've had to look up to the best. I don't want to be second best anymore. I'm gonna prove to him that I'm worth something." This vivid monologue, worthy of the best stage, was addressed to Sebastian. These words must have been on my heart for a long time. But after they were voiced, Lisa felt relieved. Only a sense of her own guilt, pity for the little business trips from behind hid in a far corner of her soul. "It's okay, I'll deal with you. I'm strong." Father from young Nails brought up in his daughter the best qualities. He often told his daughter it's only when she's young. Their life seems endless, and by old age, people consider every day they live as happiness. So try to do good and useful deeds. She didn't understand the meaning of those words. "Daddy, why do that? To keep every day in your memory. You'll remember it later in life. This day I helped an old lady, and the next day I saved a bird. Daddy, when you cheat, is it a good deed or a bad deed?" Such questions of his daughter put David in a deadlock, but he never avoided answering. In general, Lisa thought he was very lucky to have his parents. They were the best people on the whole earth, and every day of her distant childhood was filled with their care and warmth. Funnel was the late child in the family. David and Miranda were already at a ripe old age when they decided to join their fates. Both of them had the first unsuccessful experience of family life, so they met for almost 3 years before applying to the registry office. To the appearance of a new addition to the family, the spouses were also preparing very responsibly. The future mother strictly followed all the recommendations of doctors, and the future father attended special courses, although at that time to such events men were very skeptical. At work, some men even frankly laughed at him. "Our future father is well done. Maybe and give birth together with his wife will go. If I have to, I will. And there's nothing wrong with that." At that time, giving birth together was a novelty among us. So not everyone welcomed such an undertaking, and the male half of the population was outraged by this prospect. Sometimes both husbands and fathers gave such a forecast about this imported innovation that it would not take root in our country. They are all going crazy in Europe in pursuit of equality and freedom. We have other traditions, and everything is clearly distributed. Women give birth, and men bring up and earn money. Although one could argue with the last statement, no one dared to deny the inviolability of tradition. Therefore, David's bold decision remained unfulfilled, and the moment of accidental birth father did not see. However, this circumstance did not reduce the joy of the newly minted father on the last cash. And then the salary was given once every few months. The man hired artists from a house of culture and brought them in a broken-down Jiggly right to the house. The mini concert under the windows of the medical facility made a strong impression not only on the young mothers, but also on the staff. Some nurses even wept from excess of feelings. Such love is only shown in movies. What a good man. Of course, Lisa understandably does not remember the events of those days, but my mother loved to tell this touching story. And each time there were new details of her first days of life. When they brought you for the first time for feeding, I was even scared. That day 8 boys were born and only 1 girl. All the boys are so big-faced and screaming at the top of their lungs. My little girl looks like a Zamora in front of them. You didn't even scream. You promised like a kitten. Although Miranda spoke fondly of her daughter's shortcomings. In her early days, Lisa was not exactly pleased that her mother compared her to an abandoned kitten. It was only later, when she herself gave birth to her first son, Kevin, it became clear that for the mother, the appearance of the child does not matter. But life is a very harsh thing, and it does not spare even small children. If for her parents the girl was a miracle, people around her did not think so. The first time she faced injustice in kindergarten. That day is forever. In memory, on the eve of the first holiday of spring, children prepared gifts for their moms. In addition to cute crafts, it was decided to please women with a small concert. Educators put together a program and engaged in the distribution of numbers. Then, for the first time in my conscious life, showed initiative. Let me learn a song or a poem. I'm good at memorizing. One of the teachers looked at the child strangely. It's not enough to memorize well. You have to have a pretty face. How about you? Lisa saw another teacher pushing her colleague hard in the side. What are you talking about in front of the child? Nothing out of the ordinary. I'm just used to telling the truth. Let her get used to it. She'll have to hear many times in the future that she looks like a mouse. So gray and unassuming. Of course, Lisa, her 3.5 years old, did not understand the whole meaning of what the educators said, but her memory was really good. When her mother came to pick her up in the kindergarten, she right in front of the teacher who condemned the appearance. The girl recounted everything from herself. The girl added, I was not even given a poem. All the other children were given to other children. And I speak well and sing loudly. And Kelly has a cough, but she's beautiful. And now she will sing the lead song. Lisa cried with resentment. The teacher was ready to fall through the floor in shame. Miranda tried to speak calmly, though her voice trembled with indignation. What kind of castings are you doing here? Who allowed you to cripple the psyche of children? I won't let it go. I'll go to the education department tomorrow. Lisa and her mother were not present at the party. The teacher, who had distinguished herself by her unworthy behavior, didn't show up in their group anymore either. One could rejoice at the triumph of justice, but they still tried to hide behind the backs of their comrades. When it came to important events, she remembered the first day of school life. By this time, the girl has already internalized the rules of human society and did not seek to demonstrate her talents. She by habit dissolved into the crowd of peers, because in the general mass were not so noticeable her chicken ears and colorless eyebrows on her freckled face. The ceremonial ruler passed without a hitch, and she joined everyone in beating her hands joyfully. When a tall high school student carried on his shoulder a first grader who had a symbolic bell in the shape of a big bell in her hand. Of course, in her heart, Lisa envied this girl because she really wanted to be in her place. But she realized that with her unattractive appearance, it was impossible. When the children went to their classrooms for their first lesson, an unfamiliar boy from the senior class, pointing his finger at her, yelled, "Guys, watch a walking horror movie." Miranda was very afraid for her daughter, but she said with a nonchalant look, "Mom, the boy probably wanted to call me a contestant because I have really big ears. He just mixed up the words. Don't worry, I'm used to it, and don't take offense." Lisa overheard her mother telling her father about the outrageous incident. "David, I'm so scared about the funnel and why everyone's picking on it. Looks pretty normal for a kid to me." "Miranda, don't worry. Your Soar Lisa is the best and the most beautiful, and she's a strong-willed character for a 6-year-old. That's what scares me the most. I'm afraid she won't become violent. There are many such stories when childhood complexes lead to terrible consequences in adulthood. I'm sure Lisa won't have complexes. She is a very bright girl and quickly learned the rules of the game. Appearance is a matter of time. We will see with you the miracle of transformation of an ugly duckling into a beautiful swan." Unfortunately, her father's predictions did not come true, and Kelly never became a beauty. But her unassuming appearance no longer frightened anyone. And by and large, everyone at school did not pay attention to it. The fact that the girl was excellent in all directions. She was sent from the school to the Olympiads in various subjects, and she always returned with a victory. Especially, she remembered the day of the next triumph, when she in the intellectual competition left far behind even high school students. But it was a pure victory. That day was one of the happiest in Lisa's life. The 8th grade student became the pride of the school. She was shown on TV programs and even written about in the regional newspaper. But fame is a short-term phenomenon, and she understood it perfectly well. She also realized finally that intelligence and knowledge are even more important than appearance. On the day of receipt of the certificate, no one remembered the Wright's Reno appearance teachers predicted her promising future. Classmates with undisguised envy looked in her direction. The first beauty of the class, whose certificate was a solid 3, deliberately loudly said, "Lucky some people. She herself is nothing." And it was her who got the gold certificate. Who's the unlucky one? Lisa earned her gold honestly, and you got a second-hand certificate because you're like the dragonfly in Krylov's fable. I envy you. Lisa will be welcomed with open arms at any university. How would you like to get into any mediocre college? The parents watched their daughter from the sidelines, and both cried tears of happiness. "Miranda, what a wonderful daughter we've raised." So many nice words have been said about Lisa today. I must tell you, dear wife, that I have never been as happy as I am today. David, today is also the happiest day of my life. Not even on our wedding day have I felt so good in my heart. There was one more person, or rather a girl, who was sincerely happy about Lisa's successes and sad that she would no longer meet her in the school corridor at the big recess. Such feelings on that sunny June day were felt by Cindy, for whom Kelly was even more than a friend. All people fall into 2 categories. Some are genuinely happy about their friends' successes. Others only pay lip service to such feelings, but deep down they envy and dream of revenge on the lucky ones. Lisa had her enemies too, but all the attempts of detractors to put the excellent girl off balance failed. And when she accidentally discovered a mouse in her school backpack, contrary to the expectations of the organizers of this action, she did not run in. She put the animal in the palm of her hand and even stroked the mouse on its back. Subsequently, the mouse was released by Lisa to freedom. Some giggled behind the girl's back. The fisherman sees the fisherman and the mouse smells the mouse. In simple terms, a man will not hurt his own. Next time, one of the jokers smeared the chair where the best student sat with carpenter's glue. But this adventure didn't work either. Lisa noticed the suspicious glint from afar, and by the tense look of one of her classmates, she unmistakably deduced the author of the prank and addressed him with a request. "Robert, your chair's a little higher. I'm not comfortable in this one. Let's switch." The boy blushed, which the teacher took as a sign of shyness. If a girl asks, a real man has to give in. After that, Robert had nowhere to retreat to, and he sat glued to the table for a whole horn. Then his friends long held him off the furniture, but still his pants could not be saved. After lessons, the Cossacks were waiting for Lisa near the school. "You think you're so smart." Lisa laughed in the face of the Cossacks' loser. "You know about the law of boomerang. That's what you got. You're laughing too hard. Sit down. Next time, we'll have a different conversation. Consider it your last days, and I've turned on the Kozak counter with your math skills. You are sure to say goodbye." The girl laughed again and headed home. She heard Robert shouted after her and clicked. "The one who laughs last always wins. Now it's my turn." In 5 minutes, Lisa had forgotten about her classmates' threats, but 2 days later she had to remember Robert's words. In order to save time, Lisa, like many kids in her neighborhood, walked through a small park. It wasn't a popular place with the townspeople, so everyone tried to get past it as quickly as possible. Lisa also quickened her step when she found herself in the park. She noticed from afar a group of teenagers near the fountain, which hadn't been working for a long time. A group of teenagers. It was too late to retreat, and Lisa didn't allow herself to show any weakness. She quickened her pace even more, hoping to get past the enemy cordon. But Cossacks blocked her way. "Well, forces, who are we going to laugh at?" The crowd of spectators cheered. "Maybe we could bathe her in the fountain. But it doesn't work. Then how shall we punish her?" Guys, I've got an exclusive for our best student. You see, there are buildings with the letters P and G. And G, Robert, you're the man. People are hungry for a colorful spectacle. By the time the accident happened, I realized I should have gotten out of here. It was too late. Teenagers surrounded her, then took her under the arms and dragged her through a street toilet. She screamed at one of her abusers, even kicked him in the eye. But the forces were clearly unequal. From somewhere off to the side came Kaya's girlish scream. Then there was the sound of a heavy blow, followed by another scream. But now it was one of the vigilant hordes. Lissa didn't have time to realize anything as the battle cry sounded again, and another offender began to writhing on the ground in pain. The rest of the trio slipped away from the scene. Bavaria looked, round your eyes at the girl about 12 to 13 years old, and could not believe that two defeated opponents is her handiwork. The young judoka held out her hand. Cindy paired up and accepted the friendly gesture as this is where I from school happen to be. I always walk through the park. So, anyway, I heard you screaming from a distance and rushed over to help. Say, Cindy, where did you learn to do that? Suddenly the girl was embarrassed. My daddy taught me. He used to be a champion. But then he broke his arm and had to retire from big sports. He's a coach now. I've been training for 6 years. I'm already a blue belt, and soon I'll be a brown belt. Although Lissa didn't understand anything about sports ethics and martial arts, she stretched out meaningfully. Great. The girl named Cindy was pleased with the praise. I've been wanting to meet you for a long time, but I've been hesitant to approach you. And now I'm here. Forgive me for asking why you hesitated to approach me. You're an honor student, and you're a year older than me. Cindy, you're adorable. Does age and other little things matter when people are friends? The enchanted girl looked at Lissa. You'll be friends with me. Of course, now I just have to repay you for saving me. You realize I don't mean money and stuff. Maybe you're having trouble in some subject. Cindy jumped for joy. I'm failing math. I can't get my head around cosine and minus. Oh, don't feel bad. I'll help you. We can start math class today. From that day on, Cindy became a frequent visitor to the powerhouse. The girls worked out at 2 o'clock every day, and then drank tea with delicious cones that Miranda prepared for them. But most of all was happy David. It's very good that you have a real friend. The girl corrected her father. Dad, you mean friend, not daughter. I said what I meant. You see, those words with the same root have slightly different meanings. You can hang out with a friend, talk to her, share your feelings, but only a friend can protect you. This girl, Cindy, is a true friend. I hope I'm not wrong about her. David made the right prediction about Cindy. The girl who grew up in an athletic family had strong-willed qualities and was always open to contact. She never paid out herself, although she also had something to be proud of. Soon about the girlfriends began to talk about a pair of goose. Yes, Gagarin, though both God has offended in terms of beauty, but the ambition above the roof. The girls did not pay any attention to the words. All the more they did not feel inferior. Thanks to good upbringing and clear understanding of life goals, both schoolgirls had already been formed as individuals. Therefore, they treated such conversations exactly as an adult perceives children's mischief. The only thing they regretted was the upcoming separation. But the girls found a good way to remove this obstacle. Lissa applied to Baumanka to specialize in software engineering and nanotechnology. These were completely new directions, and many guys dreamed of getting a profession of the future. That's why, for the first time in her life, Lissa had to fight for a place with equals, because among the applicants there were almost only medalists. There was a treacherous moment when the girl almost gave up. She called Cindy to get some advice from NATO. You have no idea how many medalists there are per square meter. I'm even scared. Her friend answered her calmly. It's normal to be scared. It's bad when people panic. You sound like you're on the verge of despair. I just don't understand why you're panicking. I'm scared too, when I go on the tatami and I don't know my opponent. But that's the philosophy behind any fight. Overcome fear and win. In your case, it's much easier because you have to overcome your own fear. That's it. Lisa successfully passed the additional tests and was admitted to the faculty. The first year in any educational institution is considered the most difficult, so she spent all her time studying. But the workload, as the student of a prestigious university liked to say, did not prevent her from talking to her friend once a week. During hour-long conversations on the phone, the girls told each other about the main events, shared their plans. In one of these sessions, Cindy joyfully told Lisa, "I decided to enter Sekhanov at the Faculty of Sports Psychology. So very soon we will be able to see each other in person." "That's great. But what about big sports? You dreamed of winning championships, right?" "Girl, you're the one who told me I had to be realistic about what I could do. So I did, and I realized that playing for school is one thing, but playing for the country is another responsibility. In short, I'm not up to the highest level, and the term of sports life is too short. So I decided to devote myself to another useful business. After all, to train future champions is also an honorable business." Although in the voice of Cindy slipped sad notes, it was clear that this was the girl's final decision. Lisa decided to cheer her up. "Perhaps it's true. You have to plan your life with an eye to the future, and I'm very happy for you." Cindy got into university on her first try, although the girls' grades weren't very good. But the merits in sports played a decisive role. This period was distinguished by another surprising event that brought the girls together. Between their parents, there was something very similar to friendship. After all, common concerns and experiences unite people, like many girls her age. Lisa also secretly dreamed of a big and beautiful love. In her school years, she read popular novels, in which there was more tragedy than happiness. Then for days, the girl walked under the impression of the book she had read. True, she did not share her experiences with anyone. Even with Cindy, she did not speak on the subject. And the reason for this reticence was her appearance. Although Lisa got used to the fact that everyone considered her a dunce, and her being did not want to put up with this state of affairs. Therefore, the girl began to experiment a little bit with cosmetics, and it turned out pretty good. Cindy was very well versed in makeup, and the lessons of her friend went in favor of a moderate appearance. After entering the university, the girl forgot about the fact that her appearance does not meet the standards of beauty. In the first place, it was not up to it here. In the second place, most of the female students were similar to Lisa, and many girls wore glasses with reinforced lenses. It was this circumstance that helped to finally forget about her disadvantage. During one of the meetings with a friend, Kelly decided to touch on the taboo topic. "Cindy, you probably have a lot of suitors on the course. You're so fashionable, and you dress boldly." The friend looked at Lisa strangely. "Lisa, I'm surprised at your naivety. You're only a year older than me. At our age, a year doesn't matter." "That's true. But I didn't mention age by accident. Haven't you realized that life is basically a struggle for a place in the sun? It's a natural selection process set in motion by nature itself. You know very well from school biology that the strongest survive in this process. Otherwise, they just get crushed. In order to get to the finish line, you can use any means. That is why mimicry is widespread in living nature at all its levels, including human society." Lisa looked at her friend for a long time with wide-open eyes and could not come to herself from surprise. Was she really the stubby girl who was good at wrestling? No. Now she saw before her an educated, self-confident girl who could philosophize freely. "Cindy, I never cease to be amazed at you. Where did you get all this? You wouldn't believe it, but it's your school. I used to catch every word you said on the fly. And you've convinced me day in and day out that knowledge is the basis of everything. And of course, my future profession has a lot to live up to. Yeah, well, I'm in a good place when it comes to dates. Why did you ask me that? I don't know. No reason, I guess. I mean, at our age, you're supposed to have a boyfriend," Cindy remarked to Lisa with winning irritation. "I don't recognize you. Where's your old confidence and optimism?" What's age got to do with it? Lisa tried to control her excitement, but the excess of feelings and did not allow her to control herself. Cindy realized that without a good shake, she wouldn't say anything. She roused herself with a battle cry and playfully put her friend on her shoulder blades. But honestly, it's funny to watch you stay like a gymnasium girl. She laughed, and the inner stiffness disappeared. You picked up an unfortunate comparison modern gymnasium girl and anyone 100 points ahead will give. I just used to think that relations with the opposite sex are, to put it mildly, a closed topic for me. This is bullshit. You're the one who made the setting in your head. You just have to flip the switch and enjoy life. I knew from a series of unspoken phrases that you had something going on the personal front, and I wasn't wrong. Lisa exhaled with relief. I had hit the bullseye. Yes, I have a young man, but for lack of practical experience, I do not know how to behave with him. Like naturally, you don't have to come up with clever moves. If you really like a person, tell your secret hero. Do you like it? A sort of blissful smile appeared on the girl's face. Cindy, I don't know exactly, but I think I do. He makes me feel at ease. We can talk about anything. And honestly, I don't want to leave him. That's a very good start. And that's how love most often starts. But you shouldn't lose your head. The warnings of a friend flew by and didn't settle in the mind of a woman in love at the Mariinsky. That she was in love with Sebastian was beyond any doubt. Their first meeting resembled a plot from the novels they had read earlier. The second-year student needed to prepare an essay urgently, so she went to the university library. Sebastian was already hard at work on a similar assignment at a neighboring desk. They had crossed paths in the confusing labyrinths of the university before, but they didn't know each other intimately. This time, when Lisa appeared, Sebastian greeted her with a gesture. She answered the guy with a nod of her head with her neatly styled hair in braids and pigtails. Engrossed in their work, the young people did not notice how it became completely dark outside the windows. The reading room was empty. The librarian asked them several times to leave the room, but they asked for another minute. Realizing that her entreaties had no effect on the fanatical students, the woman turned off the lights. It was unexpected. The young people were confused and tried to find a way out in the darkness. But in an unfamiliar room, obstacles in the form of chairs, tables, and other furniture were at every turn. Sebastian laughed. And I now feel like a hero of a computer game to go to the next level, which there is a strict aunt waiting behind the door. You and I will have to hit a dozen bumps. Lisa was amused too. Their predicament is not easy. But if you and I don't make it in time, the scoreboard above the door will light up and we'll be stuck here forever. So we have to hurry before the nice lady locks the door. Give me your hand. With two of us, it'll be easier to get around all the obstacles, and we'll get an extra shot. The young man shook the girl's hand firmly and was the first to enter the path of the unknown. Immediately, the rumble of falling furniture was heard. Immediately, the light flashed, and in the doorway there was a formidable silhouette of the librarian. What on earth are you stupids doing? Sebastian nonchalantly answered the question with a question. Why did you turn off the lights? You thought we might break arms and legs in the dark. How many times do I have to warn you? What could I do if you don't understand Russian words? Lisa had no idea that a dialogue of just questions could be so interesting. In the end, the very unkind aunt promised to complain about them to the dean's office. Our university is for decent people. Such famous scientists have studied here. And you. We still have a long way to go. Who knows, maybe 10 years from now, you'll remember how you kicked out 2 Nobel laureates from your library. And believe me, you will be very ashamed of your bad deed. Sebastian gave the lady a bow, bewildered at the confusion, and they ran laughingly out into the street. Now I must see you off. Such a vivid acquaintance requires continuation. You don't mind that? Excitement filled soul and body, and Lisa in a joking tone replied, if we all started the game together, then, logically, we should move to all subsequent levels together. You know, That's a very apt comparison. But still, I really want our relationship to grow into something more than a computer game. I mean, we're not painted people. We're real people. I'm not against this development either. But there is one thing. The young man looked at the girl with surprise. Let me guess. Are you married? No. Then you're an alien, and your space transportation is coming for you right now. Also no. Then I give up. We haven't even met for sure, but now we're gonna make up for it. Besides, I know your name is Lisa, and I'm Sebastian. Lisa laughed heartily at the jokes of the guy, and from this on her face, there was a blush in her eyes, daring and sparkling. The young man openly admired her. Lisa, if you only knew how beautiful you are. I have never met such a beautiful girl before. It was the first time Lisa had ever heard such words, and she felt dizzy with happiness. After only a few weeks, Kevin and Sebastian felt a strong attachment. The young man, in his usual joking manner, explained this phenomenon as follows. Lisa, you and I are lucky to have met each other so quickly. Have you heard the beautiful legend about the novelties? Of course I have. And you're saying we're part of the same whole. Do you think otherwise? It's just that we're not scattered around the world like the others, but we're dumped in one place. I guess it was the end of the day, and they had no other option. But that could happen if we don't take the chance the angels gave us. Sebastian, you're always talking in riddles. Isn't it enough that we meet every day? The girl felt the same loving gaze of the young man again. He gently drew her to him and kissed her. I don't want to date enough. I want more than that. I want to see you every minute, to feel your breath. Lisa was silent and anxiously awaited the continuation of this love song. But Sebastian concluded his confession succinctly. Let's get married. Sebastian. And school. And what will we tell our parents? Lisa, listen to me. You and I are adults, and we have to make our own decisions. Is a passport stamp a barrier to getting a diploma? Probably not. Exactly. And tell me, why should you and I be held to a standard? Don't you want to do something without being prompted to make important decisions yourself? Sebastian. I'd like to, but how would we live normally? Trust me, there are no problems that can't be solved. My parents got married when they were students, and then I came along a year later. But that didn't stop them from getting an education and successfully moving up the career ladder. Imagine how surprised everyone will be when they find out that you and I are already a family. Perhaps it was the desire to surprise everyone that drove the young people when they decided to get married in secret without saying a word to anyone. They applied. Spring came and the whole world was born in blooming outfits. The hearts of the two lovers were also filled with spring feeling. Only on the eve of the important event, Lisa told everything to Cindy. Her friend couldn't come to her senses for about 10 minutes. Lisa, have you gone mad? And how does it manifest itself? Well, for example, tell me, what are you going to go to the registry office in jeans and a t-shirt? And instead of a photo in your head will be adorned with a baseball cap with some stupid English inscription on it. The bride's confidence faded a little, but she didn't give up. You make it sound like I have nothing to wear. I have a decent, classic suit and a good pair of shoes. By the way, I came to you hoping to find support and help. Did you? And I owe you an emergency fix for your shortcomings. Tell me, what sins do you give your parents for? Don't you get it in your formula-filled head? What's the most important event in their lives? The wedding of their only daughter. I don't know how things are in Sebastian's family, of course, but I'm sure his folks would be shocked too. Clara realized that her friend was right. And what would you do if you were me? I'll never be in your shoes, because I'm not that frivolous, but I would advise you to reschedule. No, Cindy, they say it's bad luck. At Cindy's insistence, the newlyweds-to-be urgently called their parents to make sure the wedding ceremony was as good as the others. They had to use a rental service, but the parents of the bride and groom never fully came to their senses. They hardly understood what was going on. Therefore, all questions had to be settled by Cindy. When the perpetrators of the commotion and put their signatures in the registry office, David, not without irony, asked. And where do our newlyweds plan to spend their honeymoon? Lysa and Sebastian looked at each other in confusion, but the new husband was more resourceful. We'll pass our exams and go on a construction crew. John liked his son's idea of family life. When I was his age, I was just as bold and brash. By the way, not a bad option for newlyweds. It's all about romance, living in tents, mosquitoes, shared meals, and a lot of very hard work. The man turned to the bride's parents. I'm the one who's teasing their offspring about me. I got married when I was a student. Christina, Sebastian's mom, contributed to the discussion of an important issue. John, that was a very different time. And now, look at all the ugly things going on around here. Sometimes you don't want to look. Miranda was agreeing out of a sense of female solidarity, and only David remained silent. The newlyweds sat quietly, silent. The important event was celebrated in a small restaurant where there was no one else but the wedding party. Sebastian's mother continued to express her dissatisfaction with modern life, but she was clearly bringing the conversation to something more important. Finally, she easily pushed her husband away. John, what are you all agonizing under your breath? You're not going to let our children wander around in tents, being eaten by merciless mosquitoes. John glanced in the direction of the newlyweds. Christina, a construction crew is great. It's a great option for extreme athletes. If they're so independent, let them deal with their problems from now on and take responsibility for their rash actions. But John is our only son, David calmly said. Friends, let's raise our glasses to the young ones, even though they have put Piggy in our hands. Let's forgive them that little thing. Advice and love. Cindy cheerfully shouted bittersweet. After the toasts in honor of the newlyweds, Kevin's father took the floor again. My wife and I have decided to take care of their lodgings. I've already booked a hotel room for 2 nights. Now we just need to find a cheap place to stay. They can't go to a hostel. John shook his head and repeated for the 3rd time in one evening that his son went to him. It's not for nothing they say genes don't set a finger, for I am a son. Thank you, brother-in-law. I fully support you. Frankly, I really do not want to send their construction team somewhere closer to the swamps, but by the example of matchmaker forced to show mercy. We'll organize a trip for 2 to somewhere tropical. For the first time all evening, the newlyweds have raised their voices. Yay, we're going on a real wedding trip, although not without adventure. Their married life began romantically, but the sweet period ended quickly and flowed these than later. Gray everyday life. The pitfalls of family life began to appear at once, although the parents always kept their shoulders in readiness to set them up in time. The young couple had a hard time. After all, lectures, credits, and sessions were not combined with a normal family life. And then there was pregnancy. Baranki forced to adjust plans for the near future. The future mother's well-being caused alarm, and Sebastian decisively stated we must take an academic. But the parents of the young couple were categorically against such a decision. Christina especially insisted on continuing her studies. In no case should we take a break in their studies. Then it will be even more difficult. Miranda supported Sebastian's mom. I'm going to take a well-deserved vacation in a few months. Of course, I still wanted to work, but for the sake of the children I will go as I should. I'll help them. Let them study, and I'll take care of my grandchildren. The young couple accepted such a generous gift with delight. But as time went on, more and more sacrifices were required. Kevin and Sebastian saw them as an obligatory step on the part of the older generation. Parental help made their lives so easy that after Kevin was born, they decided to have another child just 3 years later. This time there was a girl, in whom both grandmothers did not devote their souls. Miranda and Christina practically lived in the house of their children. What caused dissatisfaction with the men? John was the most resentful. Christina, how many times do you have to coddle them? Don't you think our children are sitting on our heads and feet shining? The woman tried to resist, but it was obvious that for several years she was very tired. John, I understand your outrage, But who's going to help them if not us? Sebastian is traveling alone with 2 kids and a job. So let her quit her job and take care of her family. John, think about what you're saying. What are they gonna live on? You should have thought of that before. Besides, Sebastian makes good money, and if you moderate your appetites a little, you can live on his salary. Lisa, she's very talented and has a brilliant career ahead of her. A woman has to choose between work and family. Christina resented it. All these years living with you, I didn't realize, John, that you hold such beliefs. Lisa's parents also argued about it. Only the discussions weren't as heated. But despite the frankly dependent behavior of young people, the parents made more and more sacrifices on the altar of their family happiness. Meanwhile, the relationship between the spouses had also cracked. Sometimes Lisa did not recognize her husband. She could not understand where his cheerfulness and trademark jokes. More and more often, the head of the family came home irritated and, not to spoil anyone's mood, locked himself in his office. The family has long since replaced the rented accommodation on their own house in the Moscow region. The purchase of real estate helped parents, although from the outside everything looked prosperous. But intuition told Lisa that the family structure of her happiness is not strong, and it is about to collapse. And soon the woman received confirmation that her premonitions did not fail her. When Sebastian returned from another business trip, she began to sort through his things as a habit. No, she found no traces of lipstick, and from the shirts of her husband did not emanate the scent of French perfume. But a small business card with a Kathy's phone number on it flew out of his pants pocket. It was not in the woman's plan to cause a jealous scene, and there weren't many women with that name in the world. After all, between this and the unknown Kathy and her husband could be simply a business relationship. Driven by the best of intentions, she put the blue card in the most prominent place. But the woman hadn't expected such a violent reaction from her husband. Sebastian shouted and waved his hands in indignation. "Didn't expect you, wife, that you rolled over to something as trivial as checking my pockets." The woman was dumbfounded by such an onslaught. "Sebastian, why are you yelling at me? That card just fell out of my pocket, and I don't recognize you lately. You haven't been the same." Scared by the parents yelling, Kevin came out of the nursery. "Mom, are you and Dad fighting?" "No, son, we're just talking. The girl said you were fighting, so I thought I'd take a look." "It's okay. Go to your room." The man calmed down a little, but he decided to set the record straight. "Lisa, I'm warning you if I see anything else." The woman's eyes darkened, and she wished she had followed Cindy's example. Now she wanted to scream at her husband, but she stifled her anger and cut off the torrent of threats and reproaches. "Don't you ever speak like that again. This is a warning." It worked on Sebastian, but from that day on, the relationship between the couple deteriorated completely. So Lisa decided not to tell Sebastian that she was pregnant again. Women did not lose hope that they're in a cozy home again shines star happiness. Not for nothing in the people say that trouble never walks alone. Tense relations in the family and unresolved issues with the third pregnancy supplemented another unpleasant event. No sooner had the New Year holidays died down than Sebastian's father called. "Son, urgently come with Mom. She is in intensive care." John did not explain over the phone what had happened, but from his tone Sebastian realized that the situation was serious. He threw to his wife, "I'll take the car." "Sebastian, but it's dangerous. The roads are icy. It's better to take the train." The man looked at his wife as if he wanted to live her with his eyes. "Don't you realize my mom's in intensive care? She's not well at all. Please don't yell at me. I'm worried about you. I'm sick and tired of your unrelenting concern." In the morning, the accident found out that Sebastian didn't make it. His mother-in-law died of a massive stroke without regaining consciousness. The husband took this loss very hard. He completely withdrew into his grief and stopped even communicating with his children. But Lisa had to urgently solve the issue of her pregnancy. It was impossible to postpone it. When her husband returned late at night, He found Lisa in the living room. He grumbled unhappily. "What are you doing up so late?" "Sebastian, we need to talk." "Not this. Can't you see I'm falling asleep? I'm not celebrating either. I have a life, and I've got kids on my hands. You don't take an interest in their affairs, and they resent you, especially Kevin." The man sank down tiredly on the couch next to his wife. For a second, it seemed to Lisa that everything was back to normal. Sebastian drew his wife to him. "I'm sorry, I've been hurting you a lot lately. But it's the cost of our existence. My mom's death has taken a toll on me. Sebastian, I understand. I'm not myself sometimes, but we can't do this alone. That's for sure. Our moms have been a great help, and now we have to make it on our own. It's okay, we can do it. The older kids are big." "So stop, Lisa. You said older kids. What does that mean?" "I'm pregnant, and I need to do something about it, because I'm critical." The woman didn't expect the news to send her husband into a frenzy. "It amazes me that you're a grown woman, and sometimes you act like a 5-year-old child. Don't you realize we don't need this child? Why did you wait till the last minute?" Tears, resentment, and hot streams flowed down my cheeks. Against her better judgment, Lisa began to justify herself to her husband. "Well, you're always walking around, disgruntled. I was just afraid to approach you. I was waiting for the right moment." Then disaster struck, and one thing led to another. Sebastian pointed to his wife's stomach. "That's where the real disaster is. You shouldn't have let this pregnancy happen. But let me tell you, I wasn't the only one involved. I get the feeling sometimes that you do things on purpose to spite me." "Sebastian, how can you say that? It's our child together, and it's certainly not his fault. I'm not going to argue with you about this, but my decision is clear. You need to get rid of this pregnancy. We've had enough of 2 children." The next day, Lisa was in for another blow. She went to the clinic, and after a checkup, the doctor said, "Sweetheart, you're too late. Your due date is a good 14 weeks, and you'll soon feel the stirrings. So you're gonna have to have this baby." "Well, my husband doesn't want to." "I can't help it. What are you so afraid of? I can see from your story that you're not poor. Does another baby really burden you? Children are our joys. They are our continuity." After her doctor's appointment, Lisa decided to visit Cindy. She lived across town with her husband and her son Ivan, who was a year younger than Kevin. When she saw Lisa, she was overjoyed. "Oh, how many years, how many winters. What wind brought you here? I heard you had an accident. I'm sorry for your loss." All these obligatory Cindy phrases I said at once. Only then did she invite her friend into the house. "Tell me what you've come to tell me." "I'm having another baby." "Well, that's great. You're tearing up." "Sebastian is totally against it. He ordered me to get rid of this pregnancy." Life changes people beyond recognition. I mean, not so long ago, you were such a nice young man, a real role model. I watched your touching relationship and dreamed of such love. Clara shared my worries with my friend, and at the same time paid on her shoulder. "Thank you, Cindy." "For what?" "For what you are." "Oh, come on. You don't have to worry too much about men. They're all like that, and you can't change it. You just have to know how to turn the situation in your favor." "I don't know what you're trying to say." "Well, for one thing, have a seizure or something. Make him worry." "Thanks for the advice, but I can't do that." "Suit yourself, but stop by if you need anything." Sebastian seemed to have forgotten about his conversation with his wife. He would leave again for business trips, and then return, always in a bad mood. Bavaria tried to keep her balance for the sake of the children's peace of mind. The woman diligently threw wood into the almost dead fire of family happiness. But the fire did not want to ignite. 2 months passed, and the growing belly became visible even under loose clothes. Once at dinner, my husband said with apparent calmness, "You still did your own thing." "Sebastian, it was too late. No one wanted to do the operation. Isn't there any other way? Herbs and pills." Lisa was horrified. "You're an educated man. And you're offering me medieval methods to get rid of your own child. If anything happens to me, have you thought of Kevin? The man was embarrassed. He realized he'd said something unnecessary. I'm sorry, I really did say something mean without thinking. Things calmed down for a while. In the summer, she gave birth to another baby boy in a bar, and Sebastian was even happy about his wife's gift. It's a coincidence that father and son have the same birthday. Christopher will grow up. We'll celebrate together. By the time he grows up, you'll be a grand old man. That's the wrong answer. I'm only 33 now. That's the age of Christ, which is symbolic in itself. They sell hard liquor in the store at 18. And the fact that doing some simple math, you're 51 years old, and that's the best age for a man. For the second time in the years of marriage, Lisa observed a miraculous transformation, always nagging, whose husband that former Sebastian, with whom she was easy and cozy. With all her strength, women tried to keep this fragile happiness. After work, Sebastian spent the whole evening with little Christopher. He played with him and rejoiced at his son's successes. Kevin also took an active part in the upbringing of the youngest member of the family. But this family idyll did not last long. Soon Sebastian started coming home at night again. One day he disappeared for 2 days. Her imagination painted the most terrible pictures, and Lisa began to call her husband's friends and colleagues. But no one knew where her husband had disappeared to. She already wanted to call the police to start a search for the missing man. How did Sebastian show up on his own? He brushed off the questions of his children, who were also worried about their father, with irritation. And he lashed out at his wife. You're making a big fuss and scaring the kids. I'm scaring the kids. You disappeared from the house without a word to me. You could have called me. Or don't you care about anyone? Lisa, you're just annoying me with your habit of making things worse. Another woman would have realized the cause of our problems a long time ago. You're in naive ignorance, or pretending not to understand because it's more convenient. I'm sorry, what am I supposed to understand? Well, I'll tell you, but no offense. I'm sick of this gray existence. Look at yourself in the mirror. Haven't you ever been told you look like a gray mouse? You're not even trying to change. I'm sick of mediocrity. I want bright colors and bright feelings. She looked at Sebastian and couldn't believe it was him, her beloved husband, saying such hurtful words. Sebastian, come to your senses. What are you talking about? I've already come to my senses, and that's why I'm leaving. The man took out a travel bag and began to throw his things into it. Lisa couldn't move. She could not believe that this was happening to her. Sebastian, what about the kids? Don't worry about the kids. I'm taking care of them. And by the way, I'm being very noble because I'm leaving the house to you. Where are you going? I mean, where are you going to live? That's none of your business. I've met a woman who makes my heart beat. With a confident gait, Sebastian headed for the door, but when he remembered something, he turned around to get the rest of his things. I'll come back tomorrow. And don't try to look for me. We're breaking up for good. It's best for everyone. The door slammed. A minute later, there was a mighty roar of the engine, and the black SUV disappeared into the darkness of the winter night. Mommy, Daddy left us. The daughter looked at her mother, fear in her eyes. How are we going to live without Daddy now? Kevin took his sister's hand. We'll be fine. There are still real men in the house. Mom, if he comes, I won't let him in. Lisa, still hoping for the best, tried to soften the drama of the situation. Son, you can't talk about Dad like that. He's not a father. He's a traitor. It was only a few days later that Lisa fully realized the extent of her personal catastrophe. Everything was falling out of her hands, and the children demanded a mother's care and attention. 1.5-year-old Christopher was particularly vulnerable, so Lisa was left with nothing else to do. How do I call Cindy? She rushed over. You meet the rescue team. We'll stay with you for a couple days until things settle down. Have you called your parents? No, it's not right to bother the old folks. Then, when things calm down, we can tell them everything. Who knows, maybe your Sebastian is the right guy. Okay, I won't talk in front of the kids, but as a rule, most unfaithful husbands. Then beaten, humiliated, they go back to their nest. Sebastian's not coming back. You're almost 100% sure. So there's still a little hope for the return of the prodigal parrot. I'm sorry, I didn't think it through. Well, we'll see. Our head of household is at a training camp, so we're gonna be loud and happy. We're gonna stay with you guys. We'll save on utilities. Cindy winked at her friend, and she smiled at Cindy. I'm amazed at your ability to see the bright side of every situation, because I'm an optimist, and you need to do something about it. Otherwise, you're a mess. From that day on, Cindy took full responsibility for her friend's house and its tenants. She advised Lisa to take a vacation to get used to her new surroundings. Cindy actively set about transforming her friend's life. Lisa, you need to completely change all your settings. I know it's hard, but you have to try. Lisa tried to resist the over-exuberant activities of her savior Nice. Listen, Cindy, I'm about to turn 33, and I don't think it's possible. What you're suggesting. I agree that you have to do something about your appearance. You can buy fancy clothes, but how do you change yourself on the inside? If you want it bad enough, you can do anything. Motivated people who can do things that you can't believe. Of course, it's hard to do it alone, but I know someone who can help you. Lisa's alert. I didn't think you'd send me to a therapist. What's wrong with that? People sometimes don't realize the seriousness of their problems. A competent therapist can determine the depth and cause of the problem at a glance. No, I'm not going. Calm down. I have a friend of mine. We studied together. He specializes in women's problems. But if you don't want to go, then I'll leave you alone. But I'd like you to do it. Trust me, you'll thank me later. And I have to think about it. So you can ride your mind-blowing car and think, and we'll cook dinner for the starving elves. Kathy enthusiastically bounced Cindy and me around, having so much fun. What are elves? They are very small people, but they can do all sorts of wonderful things. They can even turn people into bugs. Well, they can only do that to a bad person. And with Aunt Betty, the women looked at each other. Who's that? Kathy looked at her mother and her friend as if they were bugs. Like you don't know. Aunt Betty is Daddy's girlfriend. I saw her when Daddy and I went to the store to get food for Christopher. She had black hair, but I didn't like her. Cindy was interested in Kathy's story. Why is she mean? No, she's faking it, telling me how cute she is, but her eyes are evil. My mom is 1,000 times prettier. Lisa's daughter's compliment made Lisa's heart feel better. Okay, Cindy, I don't want to hear any more about doctor's aunts. I'm going to take your advice and go for a little breeze. Over 2 o'clock, Lisa circled the town. She sang songs, talked to her husband, who treated her for some Aunt Betty with black hair. And all the resentment of a silent night, she came home. The children were already asleep, and only Cindy was waiting for her in the kitchen. Well, blowing off steam. Thanks for the advice. I'm feeling remarkably light right now. I'm going to take your option. I really need to change my life completely. The trouble is, the grayness has gotten into me and won't let me change. Lisa had never been so worried. She was waiting for her turn in a soft chair, more like a big ball, with the same soft, dim light pouring down on her from above. The atmosphere was very comfortable and the tension disappeared, but the door opened. A tall man in an expensive suit, the color of wet asphalt, invited her in. Come in, please. Your friend and I are longtime buddies, and Cindy filled me in a bit on your history. Lisa nodded and felt a treacherous shiver run through her body. The man sat down across from her so that his brown eyes took in the full spectrum of the view. Don't be afraid, I'm not a real doctor. Who is? Simply put, I'm a problem specialist. I know where they hide and how to deal with them. That's all. Isn't that enough? See, you've even stopped shaking. That's a good thing, so we can communicate more easily. Lisa, I should introduce myself, Charles. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. I love the company of women in general. But it's not because I'm a sucker or a slacker. It's just that there really is a mystery in every woman. Sometimes she's the cause of serious problems, and you know how to solve them. Do you always succeed? I'm not gonna lie to you. Not always, but a lot depends on trust. If a client trusts me as a specialist, a positive result is usually guaranteed. And how long will the treatment last? And how much will it cost me? Lisa, this is not a treatment in the direct sense of the term. I have been dealing with the problems of modern women for a long time, and I have my own system of solutions. No medications, all surgeries and other types of influence will not threaten you either. Then what is the point? You and I will try to find the key to your personal mystery, which is hiding inside. Although she didn't fully understand what Charles was saying, she was intrigued by his proposal. I agree, and I'll do whatever you say. That's fine. Then from tomorrow, you start keeping a diary. Buy a general school notebook in the Department of Goods and write in it all your thoughts, fears, worries. Be sure to record events in the house family and at work. In other words, write down in a notebook everything that comes to mind. And what will come out of it, we will see together later. But I'm sure it will be entertaining. Did you like to write essays in high school? Yes. I wrote for half the class. I couldn't say no, even though I knew it was wrong. And you blame yourself for that? Yes, a little bit. My husband left me with 3 kids and I can't shake the guilt. I'll definitely help you. But first, you have to get creative. Lisa bought a notebook and a whole pack of pens. She thought Charles was very strange, but she decided to try his method on herself. At home, she opened the notebook and froze. Her mind was completely blank. She took them away. So Lisa, what's next? And then it occurred to her that the first entry should be a description of this very fear, the fear of the white sheet. When Lisa looked up, she realized that it had been 2 hours, no less. Lisa looked in amazement at the notebook, in which at least 20 pages had been written down. What a mother you gave me. She quickly turned off the light and went to bed. Memoirs are memoirs about sleep and work. In the morning, Lisa almost overslept. But she had no panic. She ran merrily around the house. Pushing the children up the stairs, Cindy's lurched Cindy appeared. She watched her friend in amazement. Var, what's the matter with you? What are you carrying yourself like a propeller? Oh, Cindy, good morning. Come have breakfast with us. Cindy kept watching Lisa, while Lisa was simultaneously dyeing her eyelashes and telling Kevin what to buy after school. When Lisa arrived at work, she realized that she was missing her notebook. It turns out there is so much going on around her, and she hadn't seen it before. Now the woman in her head instantly compiled her attitude to what was happening, and very much did not want to forget it all. Take, for example, their janitor. He smiled every morning, but invariably without opening his mouth. She used to think it was just a peculiarity of the man. And then it turned out that the janitor just had a constant breathalyzer. Lisa had disliked him, but someone on the staff said that that transition hurt the whole family, so it's easier for him to live like that. The week flew by. Cindy looked with interest at how her friend in the evenings diligently writes something in a notebook. One day she couldn't take it anymore. Look, you look like a schoolgirl. All that's left is your tongue. Lisa laughed. You know, I was so fascinated by what Charles suggested that I think I might write a book. Cindy sat down across from her. So what's the deal? Go ahead and write it. Oh, come on. What book? Cindy calmly poured herself some water from a glass. I can't see why not. But Cindy, I'm not a writer. No answer accepted. No one is born one. A writer is immediately given. Oh, come on. Who cares about the experiences of a gray mouse? Cindy grinned. I've never understood why you don't like yourself. Do I? Why don't I love myself? But her friend didn't let her finish. But look, you know perfectly well that you have the most ordinary appearance. But you're smart and could not fail to realize that nowadays you can make anything out of such appearance. It's only worth spending a little money on a makeup stylist. Next, everyone always predicted you a stunning career, But you had Sebastian at the top of your list. I can't understand why. And now you didn't even think about what I said. You just said you couldn't do it. And why didn't you answer my question? Lisa was, frankly, confused. She hadn't expected her friend to say that. Cindy. Why Cindy? Who would tell you all this if not me? Lisa stared confusedly in front of her. It seemed the shakeups in her life were just beginning. She wrote even longer today, writing about herself, about Cindy, about their meeting, about the fear that was in her as she was dragged to the street bathroom, fell asleep with notebook in hand. The next day, she had to visit Charles. She waited again in a kind of frantic excitement, and when he sat down in front of her, she immediately calmed down. But what? How are we doing? Don't be shy. Tell me. Even if you've only written 4 pages, that's already progress. Lisa suddenly laughed. You know, Charles, until I started writing all this down, I was sure I was living a boring, gray life. Now my confidence is shaken. A man suddenly said, Lisa, has anyone ever told you? What a charming smile you have. No, I don't know. I don't remember. She was embarrassed for some reason and put the notebook in front of him. He took it in his hands, looked at her in surprise. Oh, you're good. What's up? Let's deal with what hasn't stopped gnawing at you. Lisa shook her head. You know, I'd like you to read this without me. And then maybe we can talk about it. Well, that's fine. You don't think you're done yet. Do you have more to write? She nodded her head. I never realized that there are so many different big and small events around you if you don't just list what happened in a day. And if you reflect on it, you sometimes come to the most unexpected conclusions. That's good. Tell me, has your attitude toward any of these events changed since you wrote about them? Lisa nodded. I saw a lot of things from the outside. You know, it even seemed to me that I could change some things, help some things. So what is it? Don't be afraid to offer your help. Don't be afraid to do things you haven't done before. You're about to change, aren't you? They talked for about an hour. Charles didn't seem to say anything, but she felt really energized. Lisa ran into the store and wanted to buy a notebook, but after some thought, she decided to get 3. If she barely had enough for a whole notebook for a week, how much more would she need? No one knows. She walked out and wanted to go to her car, but the sign for the Lily Beauty Salon caught her eye. She had always loved lilies. Lisa hesitated. She always went to the same hairdresser, the same manicurist. Then she walked resolutely to the car, put the notebooks on the seat, and closed the car. Hello. Come in, please. A woman of her years looked at her, except she was bright and interesting, and even though her hair color was a little off, and her lips a little brighter than decorum dictated. But the woman was a real eye-catcher. After Lisa sat down in the chair, the woman asked, "What are we gonna do?" "No." You know, Lisa turned to her. "I'd like to change things. I've had enough of this." "Oh, that's very interesting." She turned Lisa to the mirror and stared at her reflection thoughtfully as she continued talking. "I studied and then worked in the Capitol. I studied not just to be a hairdresser, but a master of images. Then I fell in love and got married. I moved here, but apart from the details, no one here wants to do anything chemical. No, don't think I regret anything. I love my husband very much, but sometimes you just want something like this. Wedding images are the only thing that takes a little professional pressure off. That's it. I know what I have to do. My name is Adriana, by the way." 200 hours later, Adriana turned Lisa over to the mirror. "I didn't jump right in. That's enough for your first makeover. Something tells me you won't stop there." Lisa opened her eyes and almost cried out. It was her, and it wasn't her. Her hair had turned a very dark chocolate color. But when I move it, there are strands of light color peeking through here and there, a couple shades lighter. It makes it look like a really thick head of hair. Adriana had them done, and now they were shoulder length and very successfully covered the ears. The eyebrows were terminated as if they were the natural shade of your lashes, as if you had thickened them. I didn't put makeup on you. In the first place, it would be more of a shock to you. And secondly, I think you look great. Lisa finally got some air. And this won't wash off. Adriana laughed. Well, of course not. But I would advise you to come back at least once a month to renew the light. Lisa stepped out of the salon and saw Charles emerge from the building across the street. She smiled, waved at him, and got into her car. Lisa herself did not know why her soul sang like that. Lisa entered the house. Apparently Cindy, along with the children, had plotted to blow it past. Kevin whizzed by. Somewhere in the other room, Lena was squealing and Cindy was laughing. Then Kevin came back. "Hi, Mom." He stood there staring at her, stunned. He was called out of the room several times. He didn't answer. Then Kathy's head appeared in the doorway. "Hi, Kathy." She didn't finish. She looked at her mother as if she was seeing her for the first time. Cindy, having waited for no one, also appeared in the hallway, followed by the youngest members of the two families. Cindy exhaled noisily. Wow. Lisa was getting a little uncomfortable with the feeding. "Is anyone going to feed me?" Everyone made a lot of noise. Kevin and Cindy rushed into the kitchen, and Kathy came over to her. "Mommy, you look beautiful." "Thank you, my sunshine." Dinner was a lively affair. It was probably the very first night that no one remembered Sebastian once. As soon as Lisa entered the office, there was complete silence. "Good morning." Cindy had, of course, warned her that there would be a reaction, but Lisa had never imagined it would be this strong. Until lunchtime, her coworkers only squinted at her and occasionally asked her something work-related. And just before lunch, their famous heartthrob, Robert, approached her. "Lisa's, I was wondering if we could have lunch together." She looked up at him in surprise. Robert had never liked her, despite the fact that the entire female population, the offices, those under 30, just slept and saw themselves next to Robert. And he was really good, tall, moderately muscular, always dressed in style, and in a way that emphasized his masculinity. And he was also pompous and shallow at work. He did his job and didn't care about anything else. But that's Lisa's opinion. "Thank you, Robert. I'm fine. I'm having lunch alone." She smiled charmingly at him and inwardly froze with horror. How could she do such a thing? Such a handsome man. Just for paying attention to her, and therefore giving her confidence, she must not only dine with him, but also pay for those lunches. Robert stared at her in amazement. The coworkers chuckled quietly. It was especially funny to those whom Robert had already dumped. He walked over to his desk and sat down. It was obvious that the young man was at a loss and just didn't know what to do next. Lisa had already gotten up to go to lunch when the secretary entered the office. "Lisa, you are in charge." Lisa was scared out of habit and almost sat down. But then she thought, why should she be afraid? Her work is in order. No one's private life should be anyone's business. Rick called. "Sit down, Lisa." I didn't. He asked me to come in. Lisa sat down, not understanding what the man in charge wanted from her. "Lisa, I've been keeping an eye on my employees. And you know, you've always made me happy. And when have you ever not been broken by family problems? I'm sorry, but I'm aware of that. So it hasn't affected your work in any way. I realized you were exactly the person I needed." She asked. "I'm sorry, but I'm a little confused." "Needed for what?" "My deputy took a well-deserved vacation. I can't do it alone, of course. No one wants to live on the job, and you have all the prerequisites to take this position." Lisa was a little taken aback. Just like that, to be deputy director. At least she had the education to do it. But for some reason, she hadn't even thought that she could really make a career out of it before. Now it's right in front of her. Grab it and enjoy it. She refused. "Rick, I really appreciate the offer, and I know I can do it. But in case you haven't forgotten, I have 3 children. To give you an answer so I don't let you down in the future, I need to talk to my parents. You realize if they can't take on at least a junior, I can't take you up on your offer." That's what I like about you. You're sensible and sober, and that's worth a lot. And I'm letting you go home tonight. Work out your problems. Talk to your parents. I'll see you tomorrow with an answer. Lisa caught Cindy packing. Where are you going? Var, I'm sorry. My husband's coming back. I'll visit you often, but you know he won't understand my absence. What's wrong with you? You're all disheveled. Yeah, I came in early. Lisa told me about the boss's offer. Cindy reached out. What can I say? Girl, I believe in you. I'm sure everything's gonna be okay now. The only thing left to do is to believe in yourself. Lisa looked up at her friend. I do. I almost do. They hugged goodbye. The most important thing is that you go like this. Don't give yourself time to beat yourself up and dig into yourself, Lisa laughed. So how are you doing with your friend Charles? Cindy gave her a sly look. Speaking of which, why did he call me and ask me a bunch of stupid questions that were all about you? Lisa was confused. Maybe what she wrote is the ramblings of a deranged person, and he wants to make sure so he can send her on to treatment. I ran away, my friend. In the evening, the children gathered in the kitchen. Mom, what's the occasion? Yeah, Grandma and Grandpa are coming over. Kevin looked at Kathy, then at Mom, but they don't know about Dad. They'll find out. Are you guys gonna help me or not? We're all going together. They had just had time to set the table when the doorbell rang. Miranda immediately began to reread it. Jesus, it's only been a little while, and you were waving like that. And Daddy looked at Lisa. Daughter, I can't even recognize you. What's the matter with you? A new life. He chuckled and walked into the room. Oh, we're getting a royal welcome today. Miranda turned to Lisa with her daughter. We forgot something. The woman was frantically going over birthdays and other dates in her head. Mommy, come in. You haven't forgotten anything. Everyone sat down at the table. The youngest, as usual, climbed into grandfather's lap, smiled. What about champagne? David looked at his daughter more carefully. I know you too well. Tell me what happened. But Miranda intervened. Where's Sebastian? He hasn't been home lately. That's no way for a father of 3 to behave. Kathy started crying. Kevin took his mother's hand. Lisa stroked his head. Thank you. It's okay. Mom, Dad Sebastian left us. David quacked. Even slammed his fist down on the table like he killed a cockroach. Miranda clutched at her heart. Mom, it's okay. We're getting used to living without him. I've gathered you for an entirely different reason. The woman looked at her daughter in amazement. How can you say that? You have to bring your husband back into the family. David wrinkled his nose, but didn't interrupt his wife. Mom, I'm not going to bring anyone back. It was his wish. He's happily living with some new woman. I filed for a divorce today, but I need your help. Daughter, you know that. I was offered a new position today. She said Daddy was admiring her. He said his daughter would show everyone. And gray mice are capable of something, especially since she looks different today. She doesn't look like a gray mouse at all. Her parents offered to move in with her for the cold season. The kids need to cook. And it's getting dark early. Mom, Dad, I never dreamed you'd help me so much. The next visit to Charles was on a weekend. Clara looked at the 2 scribbled notebooks with a smile. Charles was right. As soon as she wrote her problem, her fear, on a blank sheet of paper, it didn't seem so big. Charles didn't have to wait this time. He was waiting for her in his office. Lisa, I have a suggestion. Let's talk somewhere else today. She froze. I can see how scared you are. What is it? And she laughed out of the blue. It's my surprise. It's my pleasure. They were sitting in a cafe overlooking the park. Autumn is a beautiful couple. Charles looked at her. You've changed a lot. And not just in appearance. You know, I even regret resisting Cindy. The man smiled. Cindy, you can't resist. You must realize that. Sooner or later, we were destined to meet. Tell me, I've read your diary. Is it true she saved you like that? Yes, I myself still remember her screams and her enemies lying there. Of course, it's impossible to describe in words. No, you're wrong about that. You write in such vivid language. It's as if I imagined myself there. I even had an itch to break up the whole bunch of assholes. No way. I didn't even realize I'd written it, to be honest. I wasn't thinking on purpose. Lisa, I was wondering if I could show your diary to someone. He's some kind of rich philanthropist, writer, hermit. I can think of a lot of other epithets for him. I promise, if you don't want to, we'll stop anytime. Stop that. You know, your notes would make a very good book, a guide to action for women who've lost themselves, written in artistic, very clear language. But I am a person far from all this. That's why I would like to show your writings to the pros. Lisa was expecting anything but this. Oh, Cindy, didn't she put the idea in Charles' head? It doesn't look like much, though. It's good to change, so change everything. Let's give it a try. This is great. That's just great. Lisa, let's use the first name, and we should drink champagne for that. After the cafe, they took a long walk. Charles told how Little always stood up for justice, got for it in kindergarten, at school, and at home. Lisa laughed. Did they teach you to be fair? No, on the contrary. I guess I don't have a good temper. They tell me. And I'm still, I think, razor sharp. Say, Lisa, could we go to the movies or the theater with you? It's so hard to meet a woman who's interesting to talk to. I've had a lot of women come to see me. But frankly, I think of them all as patients. I can't think of you. I've never been to the movies. Clara wondered. When had she ever been to the movies? Probably when she and Sebastian didn't even have Kevin yet. I haven't been to a movie in a long time. It's beautiful. No, not that you haven't been to a movie in a long time. It's that I'd love to take you. One evening, Miranda asked Lisa if Sebastian had called. Lisa turned to her in surprise. No, why would he call? Well, anyway, I met him by chance yesterday at the mall. He was with his girlfriend, but there was nowhere to hide, so he had to say hello. So it's his what? No, you know, I felt sorry for him. No, I don't mean that. I don't mean that. He was confused, scared. Lisa was about to answer, but then she didn't. She knew perfectly well that her mother was worried about her. That's what a mother is. Charles had disappeared. I don't know where. After that trip to the movies, he brought her home and kissed her. She responded with such fervor that there was no way they could break up. Apparently, the man is all the same smart, weighed all the pros and cons, decided that 3 children for him too much jam, blamed him. She was sure it wasn't because she was a gray mouse. The doorbell rang. The mother looked up. Who is it so late? Lisa went to open it. But as soon as she opened the door, she was surrounded. So she was frightened. Lisa, he takes over everything, and the proofreading and the publishing. He's sure it's going to be a real bestseller. Charles, put me down immediately. Charles set it down on the floor and looked at the household, who were speaking of the commotion with embarrassment. David looked at Charles. I understand we need to set the table for tea. The young man will tell us who he is and why he is carrying our daughter around like that. An hour later, the father paced nervously around the room. I knew my daughter was being watched by everyone. But Lisa, we are all with you. Keep that in mind. She was confused. Actually, her profession doesn't tolerate any philosophizing. Everything has to be precisely calculated and measured. And here it was. On the eve of the presentation, she was worried. As she never worried, never thought of anything better. How to take a pen, a clean notebook, and write a diary of a single woman. Part 2. Really, it didn't work to start writing. The doorbell rang. Sebastian stood on the doorstep. How many times had she imagined this meeting, but she was still confused. Can I come out? Come in, of course. But the children aren't here yet. I wanted to talk to you. To me. But I thought we worked things out. I gave up child support. I gave up the house. What other questions? He looked at her in surprise. Have you changed? The teachers were good. Would you like some tea? Yes, if I may. He came to the kitchen. You changed the furniture in the bar. For some reason, it was nice to see his changed face. Yeah, it wasn't fancy. It's old. It's expensive. Well, I make a good living. He scrutinized his ex-wife, something about her that made it hard for him to talk. And then he realized there was no sadness in her eyes, and she looked better than when they lived together. Lisa, I don't know how to start this conversation. I just came to ask you out. What about your Betty? Sort of. Sebastian wrinkled his nose. Betty wasn't quite what she was at first. So you decided to go back to where you were safe and happy. Don't twist Lisa's arm. No way. And yet I can't. I don't have any time. I have a presentation tomorrow. He didn't let her finish. He got excited. So am I. We'll be there. Don't you think that's a sign? Why are you going? You've never been a big fan of this kind of thing. But Betty, she loves being the center of attention. Sebastian's totally embarrassed. Sebastian, go home. The kids will be here soon. I don't want them to be upset. He obediently got up. Well, I'll see you tomorrow. She shrugged uncertainly. Lisa, in a silver slinky dress with her hair in large curls, sat in front of the mirror. Adriana was putting on the finishing touches, makeup. Every time I start doing you, I get tons of new ideas. It's a shame you can't do it all in one look. Lisa laughed. What kind of person would I make? Adriana looked at her carefully. Tell me, what's eating you? My ex-husband came by. He wants to come back, but he's going to tonight's event with his own. He knows you wrote Lisa's notes. No, you don't. Then be happy. Let him fully realize who he's lost. Lisa looked at Adriana. Are you conniving? Adriana grinned. No, fair. Cindy came in. It's all ready for you later. The crowd must be overwhelming. Lisa looked out and recoiled. And I'm not going in there. Yes, you are. I'm all thirsty for your autograph. Do you even know that the book sold out in 2 days? Cindy and Adriana literally shoved her into Charles' arms. Excuse me. They walked out into the hall to the guests, who were already enjoying appetizers and drinks to loud applause. Just a second. Clamoring. But then she throws her head back. She's a winner. And that says it all. Sebastian, why are you standing there like a statue? Let's get closer. I need an autograph. Betty tugged impatiently at his sleeve. He finally snapped out of his stupor. Oh, come on. You want to go. What? What kind of tone is that? What do you think you're doing? He turned to Betty and said, you want to go. But this is Lisa, my ex-wife. Betty was like walking into ice water. Somebody's been eating hogwash. You said yourself she works in computer technology. She does. This must have been a recreational activity. And you didn't know. No, Betty didn't know. To bickering. They didn't notice Charles approaching them. Lisa was immediately followed by her parent Cindy. And of course, Kathy's children, with her usual spontaneity, said, Daddy, didn't you believe me that Auntie was bad? See, she's hurting you too. Lisa looked at her ex-husband. They talked to her and decided she had to do it. Get rid of the guilt. The one major feeling that almost killed her. It's her fault her husband left her. Good evening, Sebastian. Turned around. Hello. Betty was silent. Lisa smiled charmingly at her. You wanted an autograph. Let me sign it. She held out her hand for the book Betty was holding. The latter handed it back to her machine, then tossed it away to be avoided. Sebastian looked at Lisa gloomily. What has become of you? Were you not so angry, so cruel? That's Sebastian. It was not at all pleasant to realize that someone who had stomped someone into the dirt had not broken down, but had risen up. He looked around. Everyone makes mistakes. I made a mistake too. I want to go back. We have 3 kids, and you know they need a father. What's that all of a sudden? You didn't need a father all this time, and now you do. You're confusing the two. You're the one who thinks you have the right to choose when you want kids and when you don't. Lisa, don't you dare talk to me like that. Charles felt the Larry's hand shake and squeezed it tighter. She has to do it herself. Why? Because he couldn't find the right words. Kevin stepped forward. I can't yell at Mom. You've already turned the kids against me. Sebastian, why are you saying all this? You've never been like this before. He stopped talking. For a while, they all stood in silence. Finally, Sebastian looked for the first time at the man his ex-wife was holding under his arm. Then his gaze shifted back to Lisa. You mean you're not coming back? You don't want our family to be reunited? Lisa smiled. No. Sebastian, no. We don't have a family. Not for a long time. She turned around, and they walked toward the stage. Sebastian caught his ex-wife's mother by the arm. Miranda, you've always been smart and calm. Why don't you talk to your daughter? We should be together. The woman looked at him. No, Sebastian, it's too late. And you know, I'm glad you're divorced. That shook Lisa up. Charles literally made her believe in herself. I'm much more comfortable with Charles as a son-in-law. They're what? She's what? Yes, Sebastian, Lisa is getting married. And I'm sure that husband will never say that she is a gray mouse who is nothing. Miranda slowly walked down the hall. Sebastian watched her silently. And just yesterday, he was sure that he would be welcomed with open arms, that he would be put in the most comfortable chair and loved even more. But it all went wrong. He turned around and rushed out of the auditorium. Now he had to make peace with Betty. He can't go live with his father. He doesn't want to talk to him anyway. After Sebastian dumped Lisa. And if he finds out what happened, he won't think he's his son at all. Sebastian breathed in the cold air. An advertisement caught his eye. They were recruiting specialists for a new testing plant in Siberia. He grinned, ripped off his license plate, shoved his hands deep in his pockets, and strode down the street.